All right, here we go. It's time to do this thing. So I think my boy Lance is gonna show up. He just sent me some messages, and he was saying that he's wanting to work on some more of this liturgy thing. He's had some thoughts. I think that if no one has seen it, but I'm sure a lot of people saw it. His last, or the live stream about liturgy that was, I don't know, a couple ago on Grail Country was very good. So if people are just here from my channel, I recommend going over to Grail Country and checking out that live stream where he did it with John and Freerillian/Nick, and it was flipping fantastic. Get in here, Lance, whenever you're ready. Let's just rock and roll with what you got, with whatever you got thinking, my friend, and let's talk about it.
Well, thanks for letting me jump in on your live time here, Luke.
No problem, Bob.
Yeah, no. So one of the things I was thinking about, I was really there's been a lot of stuff bubbling up around, and it has been for a long time, but like in this little corner, like liturgy and sacrament and all this sort of things. And like Christian Baxter has been doing, hopefully he jumps on here if he sees this today. Maybe I'll try. I have his email. Maybe I'll try to get him on because I'd love to ruminate with him on that. But there was one thing that John Van Veen brought up, and I saw it, the clip, and I was going to go back and watch it. But like in John Mark Comer, that video that Paul treated that he had, where he kind of left, he talked about that there were these three levels, right? So when people would come in, it was kind of the entry level, and then you get kind of that more participatory level. Then you get to this leadership level, and some people hit a bump there and they have to do something more. And so I thought that was really good framing. And so, one of the things that I've been ruminating on, because I've been in Orthodoxy and I've seen the patterns, right? The daily, the everything else, and so on and so forth. And so, one of the things I was riffing on is, and I hit those places and spaces, so that made sense to me, because I hit those places and spaces and had thrown my in a lot of different contexts, whether that be mainline, seeker, house church, or whatever. But I hit these places and I was searching for all these other things, and then I started to think about, well, what does the pathway in Orthodoxy look like, right? And so, literally when you come in, you really start small. In fact, like my priest, when I came here, and particularly when he talks about if someone who's new is interested, his point would be, like, bring them Vespers, right? Just start there.
Yep.
Just come in half hour, start coming to Vespers for first month, like start something small. And literally when I came in, of course I was a zealot, and he kind of let me do what I do. And I was who I was, and I had the life that I had in the path. And he realized, okay, this guy's serious about this stuff. But, I had conversations with him, and I watched how he talked to people, particularly who came in with like no church context. They'd be around for a month or two, and he'd say, well, why don't you try and just read some prayers for like 5 minutes a day? Or a couple times a week. Just start reading some prayers. Just start small, right? So just come in, and then if you want to come to the services, just come to the services. Just pay attention. No rush. Just kind of take your time. And then he might ease you in and say, well, why don't you try maybe start fasting once a week? We fast on Mondays. Why don't you try that? Why don't you see if that works? And so why don't you just start trying to build that in? So there are these little bits and pieces, and you come in just where you're at, and you just come in nice and slow, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then that grows. So one of the things you learn is if you start doing it, maybe you do the Trisagion prayer and the Jesus prayer, and you do that. It's like 10 minutes in the morning, and then you start, like, that's something you can do, and then you start seeing it, and then you start maybe doing that more times during the day. It's just this natural progression. Like when you start to work out, you don't go and try and run a marathon the first time you start working out, right? So you start building these muscles, and then there's some scaffolding, and maybe you might want to start coming to catechism class. But at any rate, you start participating right there where they're at. But the thing that I really loved about it is that the same thing you start doing and start practicing at this very micro, small level, that thing scales all the way up to what a monk on Mount Athos will be doing, because you're participating in the very same things that you would be participating in if you ended up in a monastery or a convent. So, for example, when you start coming and showing up at a Vespers, monasteries are doing Vespers every day all around the globe, 24, 365 days a year. So you're starting with the very rubrics of the things that are going to become the way of life, whether you are a newbie or you are a saint, right? And
Yeah.
so it's literally, you don't have to move from the music college to the business college, like, and then the other thing is like, wherever you're at, like if you just want to settle in and you are a faithful attender, and you're loving your family and you're doing the prayers in the home and you're a participator in the church and you're loving people and making meals and breaking bread or whatever, that's amazing. But what if you want to get into the deepest ontological and metaphysical sort of conversation? Well, all that, like, go to Maximus. Like, I mean, all that. Don't. So wherever you're at, like, the whole thing feeds itself into one integrated movement. And so the further up, further in is all the same thing. And then again, the things that that you would do in your own life, you're doing the very same things at different levels and different intensities and different time frames and what everything else as what's happening and what the saints are doing. So as I'm sitting there and I'm seeing what liturgy does, and I see about the daily practices or whatever, and I see that comment of John Mark Comer, I'm like, in some ways, that all that stuff builds into, and it has it all.
So in saying all that, are you saying the problem that John Mark Comer sees with his 3 levels and then people getting to the point where they need something else that's fulfilled within Orthodoxy?
I think what, I've been ruminating on, trying to figure out is like, so you hear it, which is orthodoxy is a way of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not that, like, so yes, the creed is important. We say that we're chrismated and baptized, right? But orthodoxy is more a way of life than it is the creed, if that makes sense, right? I think when you're in some of the other elements, I struggled to have all the things I needed to have this holistic, integrated path. I was out there trying to build devotional guides and all these other things, because my own prayer life and other people's prayer lives. And so I think that probably the same thing you ran into, where you started asking all the tough questions and couldn't get the right answers or whatever, is I do think that there, for many things, I think you hit there's a ceiling you can hit, if that makes sense, for certain people.
Yeah, so I would ask you this question, and I mean, I don't, we're both relatively new into Orthodoxy, so I mean, I actually sometimes forget. I had forgotten how long I've been attending the Orthodox Church, but then I just put out that video, the other day, where it was my last day as a Protestant or whatever, where I went to that Pete Enns conference, which is a good marker for me. Like, I remember that night. And then I'm sure that next week or whatever, it was, I don't know, it was probably like a Wednesday night or something like that. That next week, I started going to Orthodox services, and I just didn't go back to my other church. And so but part of what I spoke about, it's funny, it's very apropos to what you're talking about with that John Mark Comer stuff, is that's essentially what I said to Pete Enns in that Q&A, and then his response, which was really good, is if it just started to feel like I was speaking another language. And so he was like, and he said he's had 4 or 5 of those experiences in his life where he felt like in order to continue to grow, or you could say, like, if all of the Christian life is suffering, and this is what Jordan Hall talked about the other day, and suffering by, Christ made perfect by what he suffered, even Christ. If suffering just means to undergo, which is what it means in the Greek, which is a very Buddhist idea, but it's also a Christian idea. And so then it's just like,
Sherry Suitors, you have to go through it. The only way out is
the voluntary acceptance of that, to undergo. It's just transformation. Just being is suffering. It's just what it is. It's just like, it doesn't have to be something that you're constantly fighting against. You just accept it. You voluntarily accept it. Not my will, but your will. Let it be to me according to your word, all that. But in order to keep it's I had the experience, and Pete Enns had the experience, and John Mark Comer has the experience where it felt like for me, and for them at certain points in their life, in order for them to continue their suffering, to continue undergoing their transformation, they needed something else. Here's this isn't going to be a softball, but it's the kind of question that I like.
I want to ask this question for you. What was the something else?
So for me, I think truly it was honest. It was a lot of what I found in this corner, which is why I'm here. It was honest intellectual inquiry with people who had different opinions than me, who were open to the truth outside of the truth they currently apprehend.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have to be in a truly diverse place, like an estuary or whatever, intellectually, in order to have those conversations, and it has nothing to do with aptitudes necessarily, but there is, because of the component of us thinking together and what I like to call groupthink and non-talking talking and all that stuff. I think because of the boundedness of the evolution of how we've progressed, we went from tribal societies, this is a little bit of that Richard Rowland stuff, to nationalistic societies, to now to these individualistic societies. But there's also groupthink components in that, because we still think individually and collectively. You can get in these groups where you're siloed. We talk about this stuff all the time. You can't even, you're a fish that doesn't know he's wet. That's why we bring up that little story, that anecdote all the time. And that's how I felt. I felt like I was like the one weird zebra, to riff on JBP's thing evolutionarily, that was on the outside of the thing, who like didn't have the stripes or had the red streak. And I'm just like, what's going on? And you're vulnerable out there on the outside to get picked off. I just felt like, to some degree, I'm always going to feel like a perpetual outsider. That's just part of my thing. But I have found within Orthodoxy, to a degree, that, because people always ask me these questions. I'll say all these things on here, and it's not like I'm speaking for Orthodoxy. I'm speaking for Luke.
Right, me too. Yeah.
And so, because people will be like, what's the Orthodox answer? It's not, because of the way that I understand Orthodoxy, there's not a magisterium. The way that the Orthodox do canon law is completely different to the way the West does canon law.
And I brought this up. So one of the things that's frustrating for my wife to a certain extent, because she's, we're bringing along and I'll watch certain videos. We watched a video of Bishop Callisto Swear. And he was basically espousing hopeful universalism in that conversation, and he was talking, Saint Simeon and other folks and whatever. And then we were watching some other video of another bishop, and it seemed like he seemed to be talking about something more like an eternal separation, not a conscious torment and hell thing, but more of an eternal separation. And she's like, whoa, wait a minute. She's like, which one's right? I said, well, you're going to have to open, because here's what's going to happen here. It's like, it's a big tent. So they're both bishops in communion and not in trouble. And they both hold these different views. And so it's weird that within the rigor of Orthodoxy, it allows this big tent on some of these things you can't overly define. If that makes
what sense. Are we conserving? Hospitality.
Yeah. So, but that's hard for my wife, who's very literal, right? Because she wants to be given like, for her, she really appreciates, just give me a set of facts, right? And so for her, confessionality is very comforting, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, but to me, there's a false. This is the thing, though, is there's a false security in there. There's a deception in the confessionality, which is that, and like PBK said this in my first conversation with him, is like, he said something like, the confessions and the ideas and the statements of faith are this thin veneer. They're this thin rind over the deeper thing, which is underneath that, which is these things that we all know. It's like I think PVK was talking. No, Eric Weinstein. That clip that PVK played the other day of like belief and unbelief and Polanyi. Like those things are both in every person. So, and this is why I love the God of Your Own Understanding so much, and what Sherry and Chad and all those cats spoke about so well in that George MacDonald faith essay video is that truly, and this is why Chad is so adamant. You go to any church, there's as many different views of God as there are people, because that's the only understanding of God you have is yours. There isn't
And so you,
the
so
delusion of
you found,
confessionalism that you can narrow and box in this understanding of God is it's a delusion.
you felt more comfortable. I mean, obviously, and I can, someone like you can can fit can fit better in it. It gives you the room. Orthodoxy, just the way,
Yeah,
like, it gives you the room to be Luke fully in it.
I think so. So far that I've found, because then people will ask that, more temperamentally conservative, theologically conservative folks will say that kind of thing. Like Anselman's challenged me on a lot of things. Like he says all the time, on Orthodoxy Sunday, doesn't Luke realize there's all these anathemas being said? He brings that up all the time. Or and I don't know. Every time someone really pushes me on stuff, like I'll share things with a local deacon friend, or I'll talk to my priest about things. The thing is like I'm no different. I don't speak any differently than I do in these live streams than I do at my parish and with my priest. It's all the same thing. And no one has chastised me. Now, listen, that might be a little bit different from parish to parish, because I think, different priests, there is a degree of, I wouldn't say autonomy, but individual expression of a particular parish body under the jurisdiction of a bishop. So like if I'm gonna go to like Father Peter Here's church or something, like Father Peter Here's is probably not gonna like a lot what I have to say. I'm guessing, for example.
I want to bring up something. God bless you, Phlebas. Phlebas, I wish you would jump in and be a part of this conversation, but he's in here just kind of trolling about, the Apostle Paul making tension in the real world, and you guys are working towards Athos. And Phlebas, that is such an entirely
I don't even know what he means.
mischaracterization of what I've been communicating. I'm talking about real life practical things that people are doing in their real life. Yes, you can potentially rise up. And by the way, there are saints that aren't on Mount Athos. The Matushka Olga is this wonderful new North American saint who was just canonized, and she was a priest's wife, and she was a native Alaskan. And her love and care for the villagers and the people, and how she, made them things, and so on and so forth. So for you to characterize what we're talking about here as anything like that is this total BS, bro. Like, I mean, come on, man. We're having good faith conversations, and you're out here espousing that stuff. Now, I love you, man. We're good. Come in here and talk about this stuff, but don't mischaracterize what we're talking about.
I love the pushback. Like I just replied to Anselman in a comment the other day or something, like thankful for you, brother. Even this so like it's really hard. It's really hard. Again, if all knowledge it comes through initiation, through being initiated in something, which I call personalist knowing, which includes all the P's. This is the problem, is it includes all the P's in as one. The multiplicity of all the P's as one is personal knowing, which is had through initiation. And so like when you're trying to describe the phronema of the Orthodox Church, what I think is the mind of Christ, to someone who has not been initiated in this, and this is probably to your point, Lance, in the liturgies, in the prayers, in the mystical tradition of the East, it's just like, I don't know. It's like it's me trying to explain Chinese to you, speaking Chinese when you don't speak Chinese. And I think this is again is the delusion of the modernist definitional. This is why even though we swim in these corners where we've theoretically, right, diminished the importance of propositional knowledge, guess what? We are still 500 years into it, post-Reformation and the Gutenberg printing press. People still believe propositional knowledge carries more weight than it does, which is where I would say this Free Willian comment comes in. You'd almost think you were describing something called the Eastern Heterodox Church. That's stemming from belief that heterodoxy and orthodoxy is primarily about propositional knowledge.
Right.
That's why you're saying that.
In this point here, like, what did I start this off as I was talking about this? I was focusing on practices, what you're really doing and participating in your own life. I even made the comment that the creeds are wildly important, all of their stuff. I actually made the comment that I'm not talking about the creed stuff. It's actually the participation, the prayer life, right?
Yeah.
How you're transforming yourself. So I'm talking about the practical and the participatory, and doing it in my real life and seeing other people's do it in their real life and seeing the transformation. And Phoebus is, and you're talking about, I'm talking about video games or something. Man, I'm practice, practice, practice. That's, if you've ever spent any time around me and what I do and what I talk about is and my first thing, like when I went, like after that, I started reading about Orthodoxy, and I say this over and over, and this is the exact thing I said to my wife where I'm going. I went to go see if it worked, not what their propositions were or if the theology right. I wanted to go do the thing and see if it worked. It doesn't get any more practical than that. And one of the things it does, which is one of your things, Luke, which is it also, as you start practicing and you start participating in these things, it gave me a different way of seeing the world too. Like just the practical participation in it started to give me, and Chuck sees a guy who talks in 12-step recovery circles about how he needed a new pair of glasses, and that's what the journey is, right?
Yeah.
And that ties into your whole vision and seeing. So any rate, Cletus, if you're allergic to levels, like C.S. Lewis talks about, further up, further in. Like I think everything is about transformation.
So here's where this is why I like to stress the Jordan Daniel Wood Maximus stuff so much, which again, this is another hard thing to explain, but I'll try to say it again, is like people get, Americans in particular, American liberals, because America is the origin and epitome and exemplar of liberalism. That's what America is. We are allergic to hierarchy because we're fundamentally egalitarianism. This is why this whole, but this is why I like to stress, I think it was said in that Jordan Daniel Wood conversation somewhere really well, is that, or I've said it this way before, is that Christian hierarchy is real. Peugeot talks about hierarchy all the time. I think it's really hard to deny hierarchy, but Christian hierarchy is not worldly hierarchy. It's where the higher serves the lower.
Mm-hmm.
The higher guides go to lower. And so
what I wanted to ruminate with you about today was at the personal level, right? What I came in talking about, and why I knew you'd be a good partner, is I'm viewing this at the personal level, at the personal transformational level, at the personal path, right? At the personal way of doing things that brings transformation and participation. So
yeah,
and again, like the video I had the other night, which is this, and the reason why I had Nick on, who's in the comments, and the reason why I had John, I did that intentionally because I knew they weren't Orthodox. See, I want to have a conversation that has nothing to do with Orthodoxy or all these other tangential things, East versus West, because one of the things I hope to call to my Protestant brothers is I went back and looked back at what many Protestant churches were doing, is there was a more liturgical aspect to it, and even the use of liturgical prayers and things like that. And I feel like it's something that's valuable in someone's real life. Like, I'm in here talking about real life stuff, And the other thing is I saw that map very well onto the 12-step life, right? And how you practice this daily thing that you do for transformation and growth. So I hope people don't. Go ahead.
No, I want to address Nick's question or clarification here, because he was in the first convo, and so he says, I don't disagree with most of the critiques of Western Christianity. I'm just tired of talking about and pretending like going east saves the individual from the collective decay. Completely agree with you. That's not what I'm talking about. Nick, I posted, I clipped your thing about why you haven't converted to Orthodoxy and posted it on my channel. I am not an apologist or an evangelical like trying to get people to convert to Orthodoxy thing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about my own. And in many ways, I actually envy you that you didn't convert to Orthodoxy and that in good conscience you could do it. I actually am planning to look up Jordan Hall's thing because Christian brought this up. I know Christian's here, Christian Baxter. He brought up in the online estuary thing that in the some podcast, I can't remember what it is, but one of the podcasts where Jordan Hall is talking about his conversion, toward the end of it, he said how as a smart intellectual person could, like Jordan Hall could in good conscience with integrity submit to the statement of faith of this Calvinist evangelical Baptist church. Good Lord, do I want to hear that? Because I couldn't figure out how to do that. And to some degree, I don't think that, I don't know what American Orthodoxy is. I've spoken about that a lot. I don't know how that's going to play out. I don't know what it means for me to be Orthodox, because if you know anything through initiation, then I've said this before, I'm 95% Protestant. Just because I decided in my egoic intellect to convert to Orthodoxy and start those practices, does that mean all of a sudden I'm Orthodox? Yes and no. So this is to bring back the Maximus point. If you don't understand the identity of identity and non-identity, and that this thing, Tayo was saying, Jordan Wood said something in the conversation that he's listened back to 50 times and he still can't make sense of it. I'm going to give you the quote from Maximus's Ambiguum that Jordan Daniel Wood's whole book is based on, which is basically almost everything he's ever saying. That the word of God, very God, wills always and in all things to instantiate the mystery of his incarnation. Replay that over and over and over, and you will never exhaust the meaning of it. Ever. So that's in identity and in non-identity. So that is in the Orthodox Church, the explicit, tangible Orthodox Church. That is not in the explicit, tangible Orthodox Church. And if you don't understand that's what I'm saying, you don't understand me. If you think I'm playing the either or game, you haven't been listening to me.
Right. Do you mind if we open it up like Christians here or whatever?
Totally. Here, I'll throw it up.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah. What are some of the comments?
Jump in. Christian, jump in. And obviously you can go wherever the conversation goes, but I'd love to.
Michael Gunger, the reason I said that is because it's liturgist.
I know. He's so funny, dude. I love that. I just watched a Phoenix clip and I see Michael Gunger. By the way, I love he makes beautiful things. It's still one of I actually play that all the time. I love that.
So like, I don't understand. This is where I don't understand. Like, why? I don't know. Derek Webb, who's this other guy who's like deconstructed, and now he does cross-dressing like house shows and things. Like, I don't know. He's really gone fully onto the other side of the pendulum swinging. But he has this song. Derek Webb's been hugely formative to me. I've talked with Food Truck Emily about this a little bit. And he has this song that from which album is it from? But it's I Love Hate You. And it's like very Peter Rollins. It's very both things. Like if you don't, this is Michael Polanyi. It's the doubt thing. Doubt and belief are ultimately equivalent. Like, you get out of the either or frame of mind. If you are stuck in an either or frame of mind, a binary frame of mind, you are captured by the machine and you're not a human being. Sorry. Like, that's as succinctly as I can say it. What up, Gavin?
There's a time and a place for an either or.
Sure. Because otherwise you'd be in an either or frame of mind.
When you're coding, there's a time for an either or, right?
Right. I'm with you. But when you say it, I don't think it sounds like you're saying something that's either or. You know what I mean?
But I'm not.
Right. It's too tricky though. It's like I was just doing a video on the ways in which like hierarchies bind and blind. I ran with that, and then I asked GPT-4 to give me examples of experiments. And so, yeah, I'm with you. You have to be able to practice the. You need to be able to switch into and out of different states of mind and modes. Like
Yeah.
you can't get stuck in any one of them.
Well, and the actually, I mean, I put this in, I think, Sam's talk with Jordan Hall. That's actually what I mean when I talk about iconic thinking, is where you just freely move back and forth between all without a diminishment or a loss of either. But
Nick,
look at you. Come here and the sin of certainty. Yeah.
What's this? I just want y'all to name this game that you're playing or are about to play. Can you name it explicitly?
Ooh, I'm not sure what it is.
That was my question hopping in here. What game are we playing? So I don't want to come in and just play my game. I want to know what game you guys are playing.
It's a good question.
this is a Luke just chatting. I would share. I actually reached out to him. So why am I here? I'll be very explicit why I'm here. So I had this conversation with Nick the other night. I've been seeing these patterns that I've been able to put into my life, and these practices are playing out in ways, and I've been in a lot of contexts that are really transformative to me. And I'm starting to see the depth in them and the value. And I also struggle with some of the forms. And again, it's almost like, and I don't want to be offensive. It's when you talk about Pajot or Peterson will talk about, you can have an aim and then there's kind of the higher aim or whatever. I have this sense that building in some of these liturgical practices and how these things come together in a real space, like, are better integrated and so on and so forth. So I've just been ruminating about that a lot, and see it being talked about a lot. So I showed up to want to talk about this just kind of kick that around. Now the conversation can go anywhere. And I'm glad Nick jumped in here. And again, the reason why I had Gavin, so my wife was the first, she's never watched anything, and she watched this. And her first comment about what we did on liturgy and sacrament, the conversation, she was like, it's like, man, people in the comments are awful. I'm like, don't worry about that. I'm like, that's okay. She's like, why is that okay? I'm like, one, you say stuff on the internet about this, it's going to happen. I said, secondly, it's fun.
That's where we go to become a troll. Like we go into the live chat to become a troll.
Like I love Phlebas. I can still clap back, but I love that. And then she said the other thing was, she's like, she liked Nick and whatever. She's like, why would you bring people that were on there that were disagreeing with you? I said, I asked them on specifically because I knew they would not agree with everything, because I wanted to have the conversation.
Hell yeah, because you can't think without tension, without pushback, without others.
I like them. Like they're good young men, and I appreciate them, and I've had great conversations, and so I respect them. And so I knew we could have a good faith conversation. And so this whole world, like, she's like, why would she say, she didn't know why I would do that?
Because it's fun. Nick, you ready? You're muted. You ready to rock?
I'm muted. It'll be a short thing. I've got the kids, which is why I'm even on today.
Okay.
I'm not working. But the thing is, I was going to put the sin of uncertainty, but I don't think that's a sin. So I actually agree with these guys on, the Rollins, the ends of the world with certain things. But just to clarify, Luke, because I agree with most of what you say, and I haven't dove deep into personalism. I don't like. Good. I don't like. I don't like always putting. Well, anyway, here's one of my thought. Here's a thought for you.
Yeah.
Is like because you put a name, you put names on things, which on one point is helpful. Like it helps me understand things that I've been like feeling, and then you'll put a name like personalism. I'm like, hey, I think I agree with that. But then on the other hand, it can sort of like box in the qualia or box in the phenomenon, right? Anyway, I don't mean to take it too deep, but it's just a thought that it's like, is there something that can be overly propositionalist about naming things too quickly or defining them too harshly?
Selective attention, it blinds. You start naming it, and you'll become blind to something. Especially if you name it too strongly. It's the gorilla that walks through as you're counting the number of balls passed between people with white shirts, and the gorilla's dark, right?
Right. You don't see what you're not looking for, which is the whole Ian McGilchrist problem of the right brain has to be the master. And that's kind of my problem with the hyper propositionalism is like you're systematizing, you're building the whole structure. That's what confessionalism is a systemization of the propositional, which is prioritizing the left over the right. You're never going to see what you don't want to see in that model, which is the whole fault of it. That's like what Jordan Daniel Wood talks about with Chalcedon and why he's a neo-Chalcedonian is the problem isn't what they said at Chalcedon. The problem was thinking they fully understood what was said at Chalcedon. So have your confessions, but don't be a confessionalist. Like I have no problem with confessions. The law is just if you use it lawfully. I have no problem against the law. I'm not an antinomian, you know, but if you don't follow the spirit of the law, you'll become the bad sense of the Pharisee, but that's slandering Pharisees. We know from our good Jewish friends, you'll become a legalist. And then your Christ becomes Antichrist. That's the deception of Antichrist, man. That's the deception of counterfeit. It always looks like the real deal and always intends to be the real deal.
And some of the things you get into seeing when I was thinking about that, Luke, and this has been very true in my life, is sometimes you just can't see something. Like you just can't see it until you've gone through something or there's some transformational moment, and all of a sudden you see something that was there before you the whole time, and you just never saw it. Like that's a very natural progression in life, you know.
There's so my son right now, look, people were bringing this up in Estuary that when people talk about personal things, obviously people were talking about all the thinky-talky stuff, and then people start, they're multitasking and they just start to forget about what people are saying because who cares really? But then when someone tells a personal thing, everybody just like lights up and zooms in. So my son right now is reading Blood Meridian, which this probably is horrific to anyone who probably knows anything about that book, but it's known as, I'm a big Cormac McCarthy fan, and it's known as probably among the academics and the literature nerds, that's kind of known as his like Moby Dick. People have talked about Cormac McCarthy being, he recently passed away, memory eternal, but they equate him to like a modern day Herman Melville just because he's brilliant. And this book is very, I like The Road, but Blood Meridian is this book that it's called, the subtitle is something like also, I don't know if it's sitting here. It's something about like the redness in the West. And so broadly, I think actually it's a story about this band of like bandit outlaws kind of in the Southwest and Mexico. And my son's reading it, but like, it's incredibly violent. Like it's just Cormac McCarthy is really violent and it's pretty dark. And I don't know, the way I figure it is he's just like, he's going to school. He's getting exposed to this stuff anyhow. He might as well read it in something like Cormac McCarthy. And, but there's a line in it because somebody said this before, like I am the law. This is all related. I'm bringing it back. Circles. There's a line in it from this character, the judge, who is, there's many levels you can take Blood Meridian on. Like, is the judge a real human being? Is he a spiritual reality? Like, who is he? I actually think he's like the epitome of the evil spirit of the West. And actually that subtitle is almost like the sunset. And if you think about the symbolism of a sunset, the sunset is like the dying, the ending, the end of the day of the West. That whole book you could actually take as like a symbolic representation of the diminishment of the West, And there's a line in it where the judge, there's a scene, they're all sitting around the fire, and the judge is always writing things down in this notebook, in like his journal thing, and one of the characters in it is just like, what, you're always scribbling in that book. What are you writing down in there all the time? And the judge says, oh, it's a lot of things. It's all this different stuff. But then at one point in there, he says one line, which to me is like the summary of the whole book. and he says, I don't know, I'm going to try to, I don't know if I remember it exactly. Cormac's really good with words too, but he says just like, what exists without my knowledge exists without my consent. And I'm like, that is the epitome to me of what is wrong with the modern world and the modern West, I think. But Nick, to your point, to Steelman, everything you were saying, because I love what you're saying. I love that you didn't convert, actually. Can I say that? I love that you didn't convert.
And I love that you converted.
Thank you. But I've said this before. I don't know. The East somehow, the Eastern Orthodox Church is going to have to reconcile with the West, because I believe this is very true. As a believer in the evolution of consciousness, or the further up and further in, or whatever is happening in the undergoing, the suffering of mankind properly, is happening in the West. I don't think it's happening in the East. The romantic return to the East is also a delusion. That's where I will completely affirm you, Nick.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is my whole project. I'm just a small little pawn, but my desire, and my belief is that the church does. I mean, that I didn't come up with the term, but has two lungs, like East and West. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's like there's like a yin and a yang element there too, where it's like there's Western right East and Eastern right West. I don't think those are necessarily bad things. And then you know, the problem that Catholic, not capital C, but Catholic Christianity has is maintaining orthodoxy, because it's split into a thousand sections. And the problem, or I guess maybe the potential problem that orthodoxy would have is Catholicity. I mean, it still has these nationalistic, which if you're in orthodoxy, is a problem in orthodoxy. Obviously,
Yeah.
if you're just entering, or if it's on the outside, or watching internet priest or the OCA, like, I get it, but like, I don't think the average person knows deep in the political uh, weeds of orthodoxy. It's not like roses and sunshine, but it's like, the church has to have those two lungs breathing together again. You can survive with just one lung, sure, but like, you gotta have both. So yeah, but obviously, to play that game or to believe that, you can't just be outside. You gotta go in somewhere. You can't just pretend like you're not anywhere. So I mean, that's
Right.
why I still, even though I'm this like pan-denominational dreamer, that they would be one. Um, I still have to go fellowship somewhere if I believe.
Right. And
And
that's the thing. Is that
we're sitting here today, and if you read, the Jordan Hall, I thought the Jordan Hall Sam Tiedemann conversation was really good. Sam does a good job because he's a data scientist, but he's able to take those complex things because he understands them at a deep level, and then he reframes them so dumb guys like me can follow. And I'm like, oh, like I totally get what Jordan Hall's talking about now. But that whole meta crisis, all that stuff that's going on, this deep palpable sense that we have in the West, and this includes European farmers to what we're seeing here and all the craziness, is that, I mean, the West is going to go through some sort of we're in the midst of, and we're going to go through some sort of crises, right? How long, whatever, don't know how it's going to play out, and how those things ultimately, the two lungs you talk about, how those things are going to gel together over the next 100 years or so. I mean, who knows, right? So that'll be interesting. But I want to bring up that, like, Chad played this out earlier, probably an answer to your question, Gavin, but there's different players in the game: namers, testers, fortifiers, hospitality specialists, pruners, synthesizers. I think we see this in this little corner. Like, we all kind of play our roles based on our bent, where we are and who we are, and our personalist beings, right, Luke? But I also think, like, someone for Nick, what I really appreciated is, like, when you gave the reason, which part of your thing was like, hey, I'm here. I'm a Western guy, right? And I want to save the church from the belly of the beast, so to speak. That whole Jordan Peterson sort of thing, right? Which I think is amazing. So I think you are in, like Job. You're having an integrity to yourself, and that's part of your path, right? And for someone like me, who is someone who has addictive tendencies and a spiritual malady, that if he doesn't develop certain practices, he will end up drunk and dead, right? So it's like in my life, the spiritual practices and actually doing things that reset my day and transform me are where, because it's life and death for me, right? So I live down in this very practical practicing space. And I'm an exhorter. Like I get excited about, like, I'm the sort of person that if I find a great band and I know you like that kind of band, like back in the day, I'd buy this, like the opening band, if they're awesome and I knew my friend would like it, I'd buy the CD and then I'd drive it over to the house the next day and go, you got to listen to this, you know? And so I'm playing my role here. And that's what I love about like what's happening. I think a lot of what's happening here is we bring all these different places. We're showing integrity to our past, but through our opponent processing and various things, like some of us need to be in certain contexts because that's what we're called to.
Gavin, you beautiful man.
Hello.
Hi. What are you picking up?
It sounds like, I don't know. It's something like this reverence for, I don't know, your child or your father, something like that. And people have slightly different, it's almost like people have slightly different homes or fathers or children. And there might be a tendency to like your child or your father more than the other person. My father's better than yours, but that's what I'm picking up. And then I'm thinking of like the Protestants as well. And then I've noticed recently, like the fact that all of our Bibles are a little different. Like, I think that's really interesting. So that's where mine's been going. My mind is going as y'all talk about these things. And also, I think there's Protestants who think that, like, the Pope is the Antichrist or something. I think that happens too. It's like there's a bunch going on with all this. And then it's interesting that there can be a disagreement within like Christianity. And then meanwhile, at a different level, there'll be a disagreement between like something like a believers and unbelievers, or people who uphold Jesus and those who don't. Yeah. Ultimately it's kind of like for youth, I imagine for each of us, there's probably I heard something like y'all said, Nick said, I'm glad that you're in Eastern Orthodoxy, and Luke, you had said that you're glad where Nick is at. I'm not sure if Nick is Protestant or West or like Catholic.
He's Anglican, High Church Anglican.
Right? Okay. And then it's like, I was wondering, it's like, well, are you glad for where T-Grog's at? So that's what came to mind. It's like, there's so that I know there's a gladness for people finding a home and finding a hospital, a place where there's healing and transformation, and there's that kind of thing. And then is there like humility in knowing that where the person is at now is like a good home or a place for healing and learning, a school, whatnot.
Yeah, totally. And if where you are is a legitimate home. I mean, that came up in I think it was that same faith essay, that stream about that George MacDonald faith essay, but they said, I think, I can't remember who brought it up, but essentially like where you are is where you are. I've been thinking a lot about this, the Jonathan Peugeot idea. And I don't know if it's original to him, but this is where I've heard it most, is this the Kairos moment, or like Christ in the New Testament, when it talks about Christ at the fullness of time. What that Kairos moment is, and the illustration he always uses, is just like when dinner's over, the sink is full of dirty dishes, they're piling up, when everything comes together, you do the dishes. Like, that's just the Kairos moment of doing dishes. He's like, when you're out on a ski slope in full ski gear, you don't do the dishes. And I mean, it's something that's so simple that we just don't even realize it. But like how that applies, Gavin, to what you're saying is, you are where you are.
One way to look at it too, like, it would be nice if there was a Kairos moment at each moment. Like, if the word that I could say,
I think
right
there
now,
is,
right, and if there's some way to do it, to practice doing it, in each of us doing it, like, that would be ideal.
I think there is, but then this is where I think simultaneously, or maybe not simultaneously, but also connected to that is what this little corner is, at least relationally and intellectually, is that what I would propose or encourage all of us, what I want to see happen is we have to get to the place where we can speak the truth as clearly as we see it with integrity. So give your opinion, but then not schism and fight and protest and yell at each other about your opinions. Your opinions just are what they are, but then let go of the control of it. Stop trying to systematize it and let the cards fall where they may. So I can sit here and talk about why I'm Orthodox, what I like about Orthodoxy. If that resonates with you, if deep calls to deep, if there's something in you that resonates with that and you see truth or beauty in that, cool. And if you don't, cool. There's nothing I can do about that. You know, I don't understand why people can't do that. And like, if that's really your goal, then what are you going to be mad about? What's there to be mad about? You know?
I mean, there are poisons and dangers. And I mean, sometimes it's good. Like sometimes it's good to plant your feet and tell people no sometimes, but that would be a Kairos moment. It would be nice to be able to say no and plant your feet and it be a Kairos moment and it not be a mistake.
Like even that, what are you saying no to?
Well, you might be saying yes to love, right? So there's a thief who you can say no to, or you can allow that thief to have everything and to go to your neighbor's house and continue, right?
I agree with Paul.
There you go.
Is the ecumenicism of TLC dishonest? No, because here's the thing. Unity is not uniformity, Phlebas. You actually can't have unity without diversity. So if you're going to want to talk, this is the phronema of the church, I think. If you're gonna claim your unity is uniformity where there are no differences, it's not unity.
Right. And Phlebas, just look at like the difference that you and I, have with respect to things like, I'm talking about practices and, we had a disagreement here and you and I both see the world very differently, but we can have a good conversation.
There's a way for me to behave to destroy the conversation though.
Yes.
Like I can come in and play a game and.
Well, let me make this practical. So for example, there's this thing that comes up since 12 steps groups. Would you rather be right or be happy? Like if you're in a relationship with a spouse and you want to
I've been where I want to be right. I've been in that place where I'd rather be right than be happy and think highly of myself for doing it. It's like you people exactly. Are just hedonists who want to be happy,
And so there are times you've got to figure out the ebb and the flow. I mean, pick your battles, right? So that's another thing you can say, right? And so maybe there is something that's to your integrity. And I think about Job and Job's wife or something like that. So, so there are moments where you might have to pick your integrity, but it's a heck of a lot less than we would think, right? And I think you can have some differences. And, sometimes in arguments, you can get into a situation where someone says, you're not understanding me. I'm like, oh, I understand. I've heard you. I just don't agree with you. And that's okay. But I'm not going to, some people want you to just like, well, if you understand me, then you'll agree with me. It's like, no, I fully understand you. I completely disagree with you, but I don't have to assent to it. But I think many times we definitely in good faith Paul do this all the time. He'll disagree with someone vehemently, but he can make his point and laugh and continue a conversation. Like I don't think we're glossing over differences.
Do I demand that you submit? Do I demand that you submit? That's really
So Nick and I have some decent. If we sat down, we'd have some things that we probably disagree on. We agree on a lot, just kind of the direction of how we live our lives, or whatever. But there's some things we disagree on, but that's not going to get in the way of he and I having a friendship.
Either one of you can get in the way of your friendship.
I don't disagree on the basic like layman to layman level, with this, but I mean this is tough for because communions do have to have communion. You have to have common union. So it's like I'm not going to pretend like it'd be easy if, Sam Tiedemann walked into my Anglican church next Sunday and, communed with us for 6 months. I mean, I know that sounds easy. Like I would be able to be friends with Sam for sure. But like if I was the priest, I mean, that's tough, So I think it's easier, live streaming, FaceTiming, but on a practical level, I'd be curious what even Paul, would say there. Now, again, I don't mean finding out the proposition and then going, this guy's got to go, because Sam is a better thinker than 99% of Trinitarians. Like, he's a brilliant opponent processor. It would take like a genius to outduel Sam in that debate, and it's not me. But I'm not trying to throw a wrench in this thing. I'm just saying, like, it's not as maybe as easy as we're making it out to be on a practical, like, church communion level.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm alone in thinking that.
No, well, two things. First, I want to address T-Grog, because thank you for being here, my friend. And he says, I sometimes feel like I should get on here and defend historic Christianity as a system of beliefs. Well, T-Grog, you don't have to, because tons of Christians are doing that all the time. And I've said many times, I'm opposed to all forms of rationalism, Christian or not. So you don't have to, because there's plenty of Christians trying to do that. And I oppose them adamantly as well.
He's also not looking far enough back, right? If he keeps going back in history, there was no system at one point.
So yeah,
I got a question from the crowd. I literally got texted a question from.
Oh wow.
From Chad the alcoholic.
Chad's just like, listen to me, I will text you.
And he wants he's got a question for. See, we are using all mediums here. He's got a question for Gavin.
Ooh.
He says, ask Gavin what game he is playing.
Yeah. What's your game?
Because you came in asking the question, and he wanted to bring it back to that point. This is like an estuary redirecting to a specific topic. What game are you playing, Gavin?
And I do, quick caveat before you answer that, I do want to get back to Nick's thing about ecumenicism and Sam and all that, because I think that's a good line to go down. But Gavin, yeah.
The game I'm playing is just trying to show up with the right spirit and trying to practice playing other people's games instead of and resisting the game that I want. There's a game that I want to play, like that I've been wanting to play my whole life, but I'm practicing being interested in other people's games.
And what is that game, Gavin?
Peace on Earth, baby.
What was the previous game?
Before Peace on Earth?
I'm right.
Oh no, it was just I want to win.
Yeah.
I want to win. I was always wanting to win. I want attention. I want to win. And then So 2 big games.
Gavin, and I wanna just encourage you and say that I have seen that in you very clearly, that I've seen that switch. And I think very much you try to play that second game consistently, and it's admirable, and I encourage you, because it's fantastic. I see it, and it's very good. I think you're trying to do it all the time, and I love it.
I think we've seen a few people here make transformations in this corner, pretty significant ones. And Gavin, just watching your journey from when you first kind of came up and from the BOM excommunication to sticking around and everything else. I mean, I've been very impressed. One of the things that I try to pride myself on is I'm open to change. And I see that in what you've done, and that's a pretty seismic shift for you, Gavin. I mean, that people don't make that kind of shift you've made very easily, so it is highly commendable.
I didn't do it.
There you go.
There you go.
Back to your question, Luke. You wanted to get back into ecumenism.
So yeah, so this is a good way to tie back into that. So denying Aurelian's baptism doesn't meet my definition of ecumenical. So my understanding, from Orthodoxy, and again, it's going to vary a little bit from parish to parish, but I think it gets into the question of, how did you say it, Nick? It's the sacramental piece and what defines the communion and what is heresy. I've been thinking a lot I don't know the answer to this. I mean, I have thoughts about what is heresy and how do you define those lines of in and out. But within Orthodoxy, for example, when I became Orthodox, I was baptized, but that's because I was baptized twice before that. The first one, I don't even remember what the denomination was. And so my priest was like, well, I don't know what to do with that. And then the second one, I was baptized in what is now known as Sovereign Grace Ministries. But at the time, it wasn't even an official denomination. It was just like this thing that used to be called People of Destiny International, which sounds very much like a cult. And so my priest is like, Orthodox will honor baptisms that are done in long-standing historic Christian denominations that are done Trinitarian, in a Trinitarian baptism. They'll honor those baptisms. And then you just have to go through a chrismation. But that's you don't have to always get rebaptized. Like, not everything has to be a zero-sum competition thing, people. And so, like, I don't know exactly what heresy is. I'm at the place where I'm willing to say this. I don't know that a lot of Orthodox would like this. I would like to go to church with Sam. I would like Sam to be welcome at my church. And I don't know the fullness of what that means or if that's wise, but that's where I'm at.
Well, I'd point out, like, I was infant baptized in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit as a Methodist baby. And in order to join the Reformed evangelical house church planning movement I was in, I had to be adult baptized or I couldn't be in leadership. So this stuff exists, like that sort of stuff exists all over the place. So.
Yeah. What up, Neil?
Hey.
Hey, buddy. Your guys' estuary thing was awesome, by the way. I really liked it.
Yeah, it was a good time. That was my first estuary experience, and
oh, it was.
I get it. It was
Neil, you need to join the Church of Interruption.
I know.
And I don't mean to tell you what you need to do, but I just was thinking you could have interrupted.
Neil's an introvert, and he processes internally. Internally.
And I'm also one of the few extremely high agreeableness people. So, that's just how it goes.
We need all stripes. Gavini is right. There you go, Gavin. That's your Italian.
Yeah, I've been a Gavini, a Gavino, a GP, Gav.
I do want to address this. I wish, Paul, if you go back at the beginning, we talked about this, that, Paul makes a lot of comments, but one of the things, Paul, is you're viewing orthodoxy from the outside. Like, you have a very cursory kind of view of that. And like, one of the things that, and I keep trying to come back to the actual practices and what it's like in the real life experience of it. And, Paul probably gets this, like, how people talk about things on the internet and in here versus what it's like when you actually show up and do it. Like 95% of the things that go on the internet, conversations about orthodoxy, like, you never encounter when you actually go to the services and you do the things. It's like, these things exist out here and you get all this stuff. It's like, that's not really the way it works, but okay.
Well, it's this is all online. Orthodoxy is completely, the medium is the message. It's completely untethered from the practice, from the entirety of the body. There's no babushkas, matushkas, there's
the same for Protestantism too. Yeah. It's the same for Protestantism too, right? It's the same for anything, unless you actually it's the whole thing. Like, you could watch a guy break down an engine and stuff. And by the way, I love watching videos like that. It amazes me. So I will literally watch a guy tear down an engine and put it back together or whatever, those videos. But you can watch all the videos you want. You got to get in and get your hand on a wrench. You know what I mean? You got to do things before you really know it. It's the same thing in college. Like, I was prepared to be a CPA. I was prepared to be an attorney. I knew nothing when I showed up on my first days at these firms, and they put you into it's like, oh my gosh, and you learn how to do things. It's like, what you learn in school is you put yourself in the game,
Dude, T. Grog, okay, so here's something I've observed about you, my friend, is you, I don't believe, and I'm just going to say this, I may be wrong, but I don't think you're open to the truth outside the truth you currently apprehend. I don't think you want to know what you don't want to know. Because you'll say things like, we can just believe anything we want to believe. Do you believe everything you want to believe? I don't even think you do that. I don't think anyone does that. I mean, you're just,
I know
you
a lot of
can
people
ask
actually
questions that are like gotcha questions. This is a version of like, so what you really mean is, you're like Kathy Newmaning me. If you're not open to being hospitable, to seeing things outside of your current perspective, to learn something new, to error, you're never going to learn anything. And science becomes scientism and will kill the whole world.
when you're in a world of logic and rationality, you want to have clear definitions, and then there's, and then you might want everyone to speak the same language with the same dictionary, right? And so then you might then say, well, my definitions are right.
See, yeah, definitions. This is why I speak against definitional understanding. My priest and my entire parish disagree with you. So,
which is interesting in comparison to the Gutenberg press and like the idea of a definition like itself and how it emerged, right? Like there was no dictionary, right? Was there a dictionary like when Jesus was walking around? Was there even a dictionary?
the first dictionary, as far as I know, is the 1828 Webster. He like, at least the English.
Shout
He's
out
the one who
Webster.
made that bad boy. Huh?
Shout out Webster.
It's a great one. I have it in hard copy. The preface is fantastic.
But that shape, that really like that like our whole like the whole binding and blinding in our mind, being raised with a dictionary, it just does something to you. It's like the gorilla walking through you won't see the gorilla.
Dude, look at that. Chad's what a stud. Chad and like McMo too. McMo was saying something. He made some comment under Sam's video today with Vervaeke where they were talking about AI, and I'm just like, man, what a magician that guy is with words. He's unbelievable. Yay! Speak of the devil himself.
I heard that you would
Sam.
welcome me at your church, so here I am.
I would love to.
The bat signal went out and has been answered.
Sam, your conversation with Jordan, no offense, PVK or others who've talked to him, you nailed that, because I'm not the VVK world, so I'd never heard of Jordan Hall. I loved how, first off, and I'm going to say this again, but I want to compliment it. You didn't go for the red meat right away of the conversion story, because you were actually interested in his work and some of his thoughts, and you could pull on that. Yeah. And then it morphed in, so I could see how he is and how he thinks, and then that last little bit, like I was able to synthesize that really well. It was excellent, dude. I'm just kudos.
Well, thanks.
Sam's good.
I mean, the part of the conversation that I most liked was when he was going down that. Well, actually, I'm reading this book that talks about how Christianity isn't really a religion, and I'm like, so what you're saying is,
yeah, that's right.
Religion that's not a religion that you were looking for this whole time is Christianity, because he coined. I think he coined that religion that's not a religion. I think that might be from Jordan Hall.
Oh, really?
Before it's even a Vervaekeism. Could be wrong about that.
That's so interesting, because like Sam or Nate and I have talked about that a lot. Nate is the first one who said that, where I was like, absolutely. Like Christianity is a religion that's not a religion. That's what Christianity is, which is fantastic. And I wish it was. This is why I'm so, because this is the confusion. And Peugeot's talking about this recently, because when you get Christ, you get Antichrist. You get the counterfeit comes with it automatically. And so the thing that unites can also be the thing that divides if it becomes an idol. And so you can it's the same as Orwell. Like you just twist the word, slavery is freedom, and it becomes the opposite. And so you can do that with anything. And the institutional Christianity, and it's when it got united to the power of the state and earthly hierarchies and power games, Christ becomes Antichrist. And we've been oscillating for millennia.
And that's why me being the practices guy, like Christianity is a way of life. And when it's the way of life, right, then it's the religion that's not a religion. So for me, that's why practices and how you're implementing that in your daily life, the 24-hour day spiritual program of action, like these sorts of things. Like for me, and I find that this that's not Orthodox or Protestant. I think any pastor would talk about. They want to get people into the life. You know, if you have a real calling, that deep calling out the deep is someone who's called on that path, is trying to call out to other people into this way, right? And I think some of our forms and how we can do things, and some of these arguments here can take away from that. But I think again, I'll go back to this. Chuck C says, "Ask me what my religion is, and I'll tell you it's how I live."
Right. Oh, Paul. I just said earlier in the stream I'm 95% Protestant.
It's funny. I don't have a good sense of which of my videos my audience will like, because my honest reflection after the Jordan Hall thing is that felt a little predictable to me.
Yeah.
And it felt, I don't know. I'm like, that was fine. And then Paul Ian Leitner sends me a video, best conversation in years. I'm like, thanks, Paul Ian Leitner. Okay, I guess. And then there are other conversations. I'm like, oh my goodness, that was fascinating. That one will shoot up my view rankings. Falls flat. It's like, I have no sense for, not no sense.
Well, you're like a musician. You're like a musician, like Rick Rubin, or you hear a lot of them talk about it. It's like you don't do the YouTube videos for the audience. You just do it for yourself, right? You just make what's interesting to you and put it out there, and some will go and some won't go. You just don't have any control of the art once it's out in the world.
Yeah.
Hey Sam, do you think this is true? Sam seems to come into Trinitarian churches to seek to
trickle me with Anselman's don't take this however you want. Anselman's like my little Satan, who sits on my shoulder, just accusing me of all the things that really aren't particularly that true. But he serves a purpose. Even God created Satan, presumably for some reason. So I thank you, Anselman, my own ambassador of Satan that tests me, keeps me on the right path.
You would probably say, though, between you and I, just in full transparency, you're more of a conversionist than I am.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I did notice that Sam Jordan brought up the Trinity, and that didn't cause any stumbling block to the conversation continuing. So
Sam very intentionally doesn't attack every point that he maybe wants to.
No, well, I was just saying, on your channel, the ones that I'm like, I don't care about are the ones about why the Trinity is wrong. Those are the ones that are boring to me. So, but I love everything else you talk about.
I have a whole chunk of my audience that loves that red meat, and I get that I have a whole chunk of my audience that doesn't care about that red meat. It's weird. It's weird. But you're right, Michael. I let that bird fly over my head and let it pass. I mean, honestly, I'm happy for Jordan. I'm not gonna if he feels like he's got the Trinity figured out to his curiosity's satisfaction at the moment, I'd rather him go in that direction than me try and derail whatever he has going in his local community right now. What good is that going to do?
Who wants to take that one?
Well, somebody who thinks you have to have an experience of some sort to really know it for yourself, like being born into religion isn't necessarily enough. I mean,
my understanding of a conversionist, it's what I call the exclusivist religion of the right side of history. It's that me, my team, my tribe, my ideas are right, and everybody needs to come into my team to be okay. That's a conversionist.
I mean, I think that's probably expanded meaning more than other words. But to get back to the start of the whole thing, because I sped it up so I could be on track and hear the whole thing, because I totally get what Lance is saying about the practices and stuff like that. And personally, I am happy for anybody if converting to Orthodoxy or Catholicism or whatever, if that is what brings them into a right relationship with God and allows them to live well and be a blessing to their families and all that, I'm totally happy about that. But obviously there's some things on the institutional levels or whatever, and there are propositions. You cannot live life free of propositions, and some propositions are mutually exclusive. So, so as far as like going to say like it's about the practice or whatever. So, there's that guy, Joshua Shuping, that was the Orthodox priest, and then he deconverted or whatever. I think he's Christian and Missionary Alliance now or whatever. So like I don't know. Like the only thing I don't know about that particular brand or whatever is like if they have a big problem with images, like second commandment violation or whatever. But in other words, if he decides that he wanted to start a church with theology that makes Protestants happy or whatever, but to do the whole Orthodox liturgy, which he knows and he's practiced, and he can have his sanctuary decorated with icons and all that stuff. If he's doing all the practices, is that good enough?
There are people that are doing that. Like, there are a lot of evangelical churches that are doing that outside the Orthodox Church today. And people need, at the end of the day, like you say, and this is where I've changed a little bit. Like for me, what is a conversionist? It's someone to try and convince someone to come do your thing because your thing's right and everything's wrong, everything else is wrong, sort of thing is the way I would look at that in some ways. I meet with like Michael, I'm where like you're at, which is, and if you come out of a 12-step recovery model, you realize if someone's doing something that is bringing transformation and blessing their families, you just don't get in the way of that. It's just like, okay, man, wow, you were once this way and causing havoc and calamity, and now you're this way and you're bringing joy and love. But okay, keep doing that. And so for me, it comes down to it's like, I think people just need to do what they need to do. For me, what happened is like, here's the struggle I had with that, Michael, because my wife is open to it. I don't know if she wants to join the Orthodox Church, so I'm waiting, right? And I've gone through my head and I'm like, well, I could just do like Orthodox house church, right? I could these practices and the Jesus prayer, like I can teach people to do these things and we can do it. But I have an issue with like being able to do the sacrament in my home. Like I've seen it, I don't know how to do it. And I'm kind of a simple guy. So like, for example, when I wanted to join the reformed-ish house church planning movement, and they said I had to be adult baptized. Like like Nick, like I was infant baptized. I believe I was baptized in the name of the Father and Son and the Holy Spirit. I didn't think I had an insufficient baptism. But what I knew is if I wanted to do this thing, I just had to submit. Like that's their thing. And I'm like, okay, like I didn't argue about it. I'm like, and this is a group of people that hold this set of beliefs. And if I'm going to join them, then I'm just going to join them. I'm not whatever. And so I think that if you're going to do it, you might as well go join the actual thing. But I don't behoove anyone else in any other context doing what they're being called to do, because I wouldn't stand in the way of that. And so, I do.
That just brings up the question: what is the actual thing? What makes it the actual thing?
And because like when I'm, so Jordan Hall brings up the Trinity and I just let it fly past and decide not to fight that battle in that interview. I'm like still overall glad that Jordan has had a conversion experience and is going to a church and is fitting in with a community. Because another thing, like part of conversionism is, yay, haha, someone joined my team. But part of it is like the really transformative experience, the born again sensation, whatever you want to call that. And that is something that we shouldn't forget and that can be really, really powerful. Like my dad had a huge born again experience during the Jesus movement days that like radically changed his life for, up until the present. And so that really strong internal sense of change and coming to the light and repentance and all that is something that we shouldn't throw out just because there are negative elements of some forms of conversionism.
Yeah, and one of the things, Sam, I'll be honest with you, Sam okay with me saying this. Like, the more I've understood Sam's position, for me, actually, the more convinced I am of the Trinity. And I don't mean that by any offense. It's that opponent processing, right? And I see where we have these breaking points of how he sees certain things, and I'm utterly persuaded another way. Like in that conversation, which I totally know why you let that fly, because that wasn't the place. But I would love to see you have that conversation with Jordan Hall, right? Because he's a really sharp guy who came at it in a different way. And, you know, you're also always opponent processing. Like I would love to actually see that conversation if that was the right place. Like for example, if he wanted to come back on and you want to say, okay, Jordan, you talked about that actually the synthesis you saw in Alexander Schmemann, and when all of the things that you've been doing, actually the Trinity is what opened him up to belief, right? And it mapped onto how he saw reality and how things could work. Like I thought that would be a very interesting, like I think that'd be a really interesting conversation.
There is no better person for Sam to talk to about the Trinity than me.
Also, Luke, you're way better than Michael Gungor or Science Mike. That neither of them can hold a candle to you. Neither of them can, not a guitar, but neither of them can hold the candle to you. Don't worry.
Because they're
Christian,
artists.
Christian,
Hey.
we've been calling for you, and you finally had a break. Come on in.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out where to begin. I'm not even going to touch the Trinity. I'm a lightweight. So I think part of what I've heard is with worship. I'll hit this point. Lance talking about the practices. Even Jordan Hall's conversion was based off the doing. If you listen to his story, like it wasn't. And I'll also go back to kind of the contention with Phlebas on here, which is, I think what I'm mapping onto that right now is, I had when my conversation with Zale, I talked about being 16 and leading contemporary worship in a church and watching a deacon, face turn red and walk out. And that what I realize now is that I was, really disrupting a huge portion of meaning in his life, whether he was going to frame it that way or not. But that's what I come to understand it as. And I think with what Phlebas is sitting on, and even T-Grog to a degree, is that what we are all discussing is trampling on the mainly Protestant value for the proposition, because the practice is, you can talk about that works don't save you and all that I don't want to get into that conversation, but what I'm trying to say is that the introduction of the doing and the participatory Vervaeke part of meaning, whatever, is really at dissonance when almost your whole mode of like right belief is almost your whole meaning as a Christian. And so I think that that's what you feel is like, even though your confession doesn't say that, it's the kind of logical outcome of saved by faith, and even though sola fide doesn't actually mean that in the lower levels of church, it kind of does. And so I think that's what the dissonance that I see when it comes to that. And the last thing that I want to say is that, to Lance's point, and I didn't get to hop in on that conversation the other night about liturgy, is I had this weird thing where I basically didn't miss church for like 15 years, and I was like leading the liturgy even if it was just rock music, and it was like this embodied practice, and there's, so I know that thing very well on like a really on an internal level. But what I think that is happening is the worship practices that we're hitting on, that there's just this portion of meaning that's being added to a conversation that hasn't, it's kind of it's with and also against postmodernism. Like both things are happening at the same time because it's also a reality and almost like an intrinsic truth, but it's pressing against the things that we thought were absolute truth. I had some other thoughts, but I've got to get out of here. I wanted to get some stuff off my chest. So thank you guys.
Thanks for coming in. Also, I love how Christian just did this when he talked about Kale. He called him Zale, I think. And that's something I do all the time is I just
Zale Keldon.
Yeah. I'll just like combine. My family is just, God bless them. They're just, because I'll say things sometimes and they just look at me like, what did he just say? I'm like, well, I was like saying it and combining things outside of time and seeing like this unity that makes no sense to like a straight linear logistician. But if you come at it from my angle.
I wanted to highlight something that the Christian said there. And for me, in Sam's conversation, and I have this comment on the video, which is about with Jordan Hall. I personally resonated how he continued to point towards the practices and living out the way. As heady as the conversation could be, the practical shone through for me. Like if you were paying attention, towards that end when he started to talk about that, is he really was, and it would make sense kind of I guess he comes out of the Vervaeke world or whatever, the participatory and stuff like that. But for me, he was talking about things. He's much more intelligent than I could ever aspire to. What I noticed in that was, as heady as he was, and some of that conversation was, the practical really just, man, it really was obvious to me.
Let's make this really explicit and more concrete. So everybody's talking about ecumenicism. You're talking about practice and liturgy. Okay, let's talk about the spirit of TLC and TLC. Do we have unity? Is this a body?
What is kind of body? I'm not sure if it necessarily means that it's a full functioning body of Christ.
This is what Father Eric's trying to point out. Over there. I don't know if you guys are, I don't know the TLC drama, but I kind of pay attention to everyone a little bit. And so that's one of his points, is like he tries to go up the ontological hierarchy to see if it's even a thing. Anyway, I find it interesting. I don't know the answer.
I would say like in the broad sense, don't abstract it, right? Like unity, Christ is like what unites, brings together. This is being brought together. We are continually brought together. So there is some sort of, like, at the broad sense of what it means to be, because Christ and Antichrist is like that which holds together and that which divides, right? So there's some kind of unity here. Like, I think just at a really simple level, don't abstract it. Like at a very simple level.
I'd be curious to have everyone's, so go around the horn on this. I think this is a great question. What do you think, Neil?
You're muted.
You're muted.
No sound.
Now do you have sound?
Yes.
Okay. I'd say I would agree with Sam that it's not a full, it's not the body of Christ, but it also is the body of Christ in a way. I've been, I sort of have been obsessed with the image of Christ as the tree of life, and how the roots of a tree go down and spread through the whole earth, and and pull the earth into itself, and I think that's in a way what is happening all the time, everywhere. And I think the more you participate in actively doing that, the more you are participating in the body of Christ. And I think that I feel like that's the motivation of everyone in the corner, is to be a body and to have that communion and to be like joined together. So I think there's no one who doesn't want it to be a body in some way. And when everyone has that desire, I think it will be manifested in some way. That's what I got.
What do you think, Michael?
Oh, go ahead, Michael.
I mean, I feel like the corner is great. I think because it exists in the greater Catholicity that really is a part of the Protestant thing. You know, like, and I mean, I think there's limits to where things bump up. You know, but you know, at least at that point, there's a mutual respect to agree to disagree on different issues. You know, because it's like, you know, like Jacob has some places where he'll really kind of push against Christian beliefs in a way where I'm like, I can't just be like, that's your opinion. I have to say you're wrong about that. And it's like, that's okay. And then, you know, he'll say, can you talk to so and so? They're annoyed at me. And, you know, and so it's kind of even respecting like that different people are in different places. But there is, I mean, I guess the thing is, it's the humility that kind of holds everything together. Like that's like, I think that's the thing that would really exclude people. Or like, you know, even somebody like T Grog or whatever, he keeps showing up or whatever. If he's, you know, we will be patient with it, you know, for a long time, but is it infinite? I don't know. Probably not for everybody. Maybe for some people, but you know, so yeah.
Sam, what's the body?
I think if you're not taking communion together, you're not a body of Christ. So that's a thing. And like, if, you know, at a conference or something like that, like Chino, okay, so PVK is going to do a communion service. Who in the world is going to be able to participate in that, even if they wanted to? Who's not going to want to because they belong to a church that tells them they shouldn't do that unless it's a proper priest, etc. Not to mention Jews, Muslims, atheists, etc. So no, we're not that, and I don't think we ever should be that. I don't know. I feel like we're more like we're trying to be something like a community that is both shaping and reinforcing a new, I don't know, perspectival way of being with each other that is getting past some of the problems of modernity and wokeism at the same time. And we're really shaped by, as I don't know, autodidactic and contrarian as some of us are, we're still very shaped by other people and a community that we're in terms of wanting to fit in and sounding like the other people that we enjoy talking to. And so I think we're sort of growing and fostering, I don't know, a spirit or a way of thinking and a way of interacting that's plowing through whatever this problem is that we're plowing through.
And my answer would be, this is not church. And this is not a Christian church. Now, this I'm part of the little corner of the little corner. I'm in the PVK little corner. Like, that's my corner, right? And it's interesting. So he is a pastor in Sacramento, California, and so there's this Christian element to it. I see it more, and I guess I would mimic what Paul says is, you know, in 12-step groups, there's a tradition, the second tradition. It says, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. And I think what binds us is love. I think to be able to come in and set aside your own opinions, have good faith conversations. I think what relationally is happening amongst us, you know, sure, when we have these conversations, but many of us are when went to Chicago and I met up with Sam, and he was nice enough to come meet me after a long work day, and he had kids, and we talked for too late on a weeknight. But so I think the binding thing is love, and I think that's nested in Christ. For example, how could you be in a 12-step group and live authentically as a Christian man in a God of your own understanding sort of environment? Well, I can express all the elements of Christ-like love in that. I get to have that space. I don't have to technically use Christianese to express those things. And I can give people the freedom to have other experiences. Also, as a Christian, I also think that at the end of the day, when people come here, when they're meaning crisis and everything else, fundamentally at our core, we're all seeking God, whether we know it or not. Some of us are just more aware of it. And so I think there are a lot of God seekers here. Even if you think you're seeking meaning or whatever that is, at the end of the day, I think you're seeking God. But I think we're bounded. What binds us together is love, and we are a community of love that is coming together. And that's very different than what we're seeing out in the world in all of the strife and that. And I think that if you're a Christian person, you can bring Christ's love into this. You can be Jacob, and Jacob, despite his irascibility, loves a lot. He really is. Jacob's a guy that's gone around this country to meet people, and he cares, And so I think what binds us is love.
I wanted to say something about this. So the esoteric conversation may not be inclusive to seekers, but if it piques interest, maybe not. So what's interesting about this little corner is we're very adamant about the randos personal aspect of it, personal story, personal testimony. That thing scales fully, right? Because everyone relates to someone's testimony, their witness, what they're doing in life. However, also the medium of this thing is the online space, and it's, again, this is where things are relative but not arbitrary. So the intellectual, esoteric, thinky talky aspect of it is part of this world too, because that's how this whole thing evolved and how we got here. And it's Jordan Peterson, and it's the lightsaber of what do you mean by that, and it's philosophy, and it's cognitive science, and it's psychology, and it's all of that stuff. You can't. So it is personal and the thing that scales, but there's also an aspect of the TLC that's gonna be slightly esoteric and intellectual, because that's just what this is. I landed flat. Was I not?
We're still reeling. We're still reeling from the profundity.
And what's attracted us, Luke, is Paul was thinking out loud, right? And so as he was piecing these things together, he was talking about esoteric things. Now, Paul does a great job of bringing that into the practical because he's a very wise guy. So he's tracking those things. So that's Michael's story. There we go.
Shutting your drill down.
So very much you come through Paul's channel, and he's talking about thinky talky things in esoteric ways. But what I love what Paul does is he brings it down to the real, right? And I'm doing Paul. He's colonizing me, Sam. I'm using his finger movements, but he's bringing things together, and he's visualizing it and making it accessible. So I think there is a esotericness to it, and some people will do that together, but I also see a lot of practicality working its way out amongst this corner too. And I also think that a lot of people would do this, which is, I think another thing that binds us, because even though I am who I am, there is no other place. I have a few friends here and there. There are very few places in my real life where I can find people that want to talk about these things in this way, right? Even, the stuff you want to talk about, you can find a few of them, Luke, but this is an amazing place to have this sort of conversation. And a lot of the conversations are too above my head. I'm not smart enough to understand them. But if I hang around them long enough, I can grab little bits and pieces out of it and map it onto something that can make a difference in my own life.
Nathan, so he said Discord seemed more dynamic to me, more participation from non-extroverts. But like this is the Discord.
It had its own spirit to it too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still going and it's not dead, but it's different than what it used to be.
It's text-based now, but the life of it to me was always the live chats and the video chats. But maybe that's just me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's me always banging the table. I think it's the gaping hole we have right now in the corner is we don't have a place for the new people off the public internet, because there are people that won't join a YouTube chat, or they want to talk about something that has no business on YouTube. And I'm actually talking to some folks because I'm the one who's been banging. Here's what happens in real life. We all know this. If you're the guy banging in any context, whether it be at work or whether it be at church, and like, we need to do this or need to do this, well, you probably need the person who needs to do it. So I do think we need to provide that space for, because Neil could speak to this, because there absolutely are people that just don't feel comfortable out in the public space and might lurk a little bit more, but they might be more willing to come in and have the conversation in a non-recorded, more anonymous place. Because that's a safer place to share. Would you agree with that, Neil?
Yeah, I definitely agree. For example, Chad's estuary thing was great. I mean, it went public, obviously, but it's very it's palpable how different a live stream feels from something that's not being streamed. And I think I'm probably more sensitive than a lot of people to that, but yeah. And the one-on-one stuff is, I've only done it one time, but yeah, I mean, one-on-one conversations are the most powerful thing that anyone can do. Like being a celebrity scales, yes, but it also limits what you can say to any one person while you're talking to a crowd of thousands of people. But I said this in the estuary thing that we did. Like the thing that I got out of coming here was not how to live stream on the internet or make videos or any, like, the concepts that I've taken are great and whatever, but the takeaway is that everyone is a rando.
Do you have a CW behind you, Luke? Did you just like pull a CW out of your closet?
I'm a wizard.
Also, someone needs to explain to Nathan Woods that babies don't come out of Discord, that they're in fact born through a different portal. But anyway.
This isn't, sorry. So Neil, this isn't to detract from the point that you're making, but this is a new, this is just a surprise guest. This is just a fun thing that we can do because we live in the same town.
Man, your setup is horrible.
Yeah, I know. It's almost like I don't do this.
No, I think he's talking about me.
Talking about
one of the things I've been thinking about is because BOM kind of grew. It started small and it kind of grew and it kind of has its own things. Like one of the things I've been kicking around, and I don't know if Discord's the right thing, is that to create a space that doesn't have potentially all the extra with the posting and stuff like that, where people could go in and have those conversations. And one of the things I've been thinking about doing, I can't do this all day, every day, but I can show up at a certain time every week and say, hey, we'll have conversations like you see on PBK's channel for newbies or stuff like that. And basically just have it be the voice chats. And, if other people would want to do that, it's just holding open a space and a place for people to have the conversations that maybe doesn't have some of the things of BOM, and again, limit maybe the posting channels or whatever, where it's just the tool to afford a space and a place for good faith conversation.
What does CW think?
I honestly, I don't know how you can do this. Like you have this tiny MacBook. Is it a MacBook?
It is,
and then the
and it's old,
and the resolution is horrible.
Yeah, this is a professional
and the
thing.
Screen with your viewing like 6 or 5 people on is so tiny. I mean, it's not even the size of like a sponge, like like a dish.
You guys are getting the insider view of how low tech and unskilled I am
And
at
yet
this.
you have this obscenely large microphone that you've placed in front of the screen.
That's for you. I put it over here before.
So why isn't there a Twin Cities meetup?
There is.
There is?
There always has been.
There always has been. Okay. All right. Good.
We're just low key.
You're low key.
They're the Sophia of the estuary group. They're hidden. They're mysterious.
Yeah. Well, I was actually going to those meetings when like Luke was too cool to attend them. Like it was
the estuary meetings?
They weren't even estuary. It was like a proto estuary at that time.
You mean a meetup, a Jordan Peterson meetup?
It wasn't even a Jordan. It was I mean, it was like an adjunct Vanderverse kind of thing.
Yeah.
At that time. Yeah, and I don't even know if estuary was a thing yet.
I still tell normies that what I do on that night is I go to a podcast discussion club. That's how I explain it to normies in a way that it's like a book club, but about the podcast that we like to listen to. Oh, that conceivably makes sense as a thing. Good for you, right?
that's more socially acceptable than the horrible truth.
So
I wouldn't even know how to get the horrible truth across.
Yeah.
Now CW's here and now Paul wants to come play because we're not cool enough until CW shows up.
Honestly, like Sam, like the window that you're in is like no larger than a forever postage stamp.
Listen, I need to start grimming. I need to start grimming this. I need to start grifting so I can get a huge computer like CW has in his lair,
or like 5 monitors in a back cave like Paul has.
Yeah, exactly. So so now I'm curious. You've never told me this. What was the group and how did it start and who was running it before the estuary?
I don't know if it was Joel didn't start it. It was somebody who just like has dropped off now. Who ironically set up the first meetup.
Because our first thing was at Head Flyer.
Yeah,
right?
We were at Lake Harriet is where we were first meeting. And yeah, you were too cool to show up. Eventually you did.
I didn't hear about it.
No, you knew about it.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
Come on.
You didn't want to compromise your celebrity. Well, that's still our problem with Paul Anleitner. He never comes to fucking anything. Because he has like a bona fide podcast and stuff.
I've invited Paul before. I had
Paul should go.
Kudos
Paul
to Sam for having a successful show and yet fraternizing with the hoi polloi.
Well, so
this is disingenuous.
I know a guy in Minneapolis who might be interested. If you guys have an actual thingy.
We have. I mean, I don't know how long the official estuary is not small, and we've been getting together for, I don't know, I'm bad at time, but
bad at time. Yeah, you were there. I don't know. It's been several months. Yeah,
it's been longer than that. Like
even,
yeah,
and maybe even a year. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not too cool. What a mischaracterization. I have people mischaracterizing me in my own house. People doing it online.
So you were too cool. Now you're just cool enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're the right level of cool now.
Yeah. Man. All right, we've gone way off the rails.
Yeah, you need a new computer.
I think we kind of do. It almost doesn't work anime, actually.
You should start a GoFundMe like Grim Grizz does.
Donate you a computer because it's just so
grift, Luke, grift.
So here's the thing. I'm call it what you want, frugal, cheap, whatever. I don't like to spend my phone barely works. I have to charge it multiple times a day.
You don't like to spend money on some things. You love spending money on other things. So don't give me that whole cheap business.
So bad. No, it's not
like how much do you buy like your cows from some rancher in like Nebraska to get the meat that you need?
I spend a lot of money on food.
You can tell I'm spoiled here. I'm trying to touch the screen. He's like, it's not a touch screen.
You have to understand that before CW did the big reveal with the venerable, the venerable digital gnosis, he crafted the studio and the experience. And so to have CW walk in and say, oh, I can't believe you're doing this. It was just the height of my day. I'm trying to get ready to make this trip to Portland and all of that stuff. But when CW popped on and started critiquing Luke's setup, I could not miss it.
So Lance, you have to man the chat now because CW had to blow it up to full screen so he could see you all.
If you pull up the chat on your phone, because this is just so bad. Like
his
literally
phone
the entire
I got it.
StreamYard window.
I got you covered, Luke.
Was smaller than a postcard, people, and it's like several feet away as it is. I don't know how you can even talk to people.
Wow.
Oh, I love it. Well, Luke didn't even bring a passport to the border, so
that's true.
They still
I thought,
but
you're from Minnesota. Anyway. Yeah, Minnesota's basically an honorary province of Canada, so like, why would you need a passport to get a?
Well, that's the thing we found out is they can let you through. This is the anarchist in me. Is like, I don't want to have a driver's license. I don't want to have anything. I thought I could get through with a driver's license. It's like, why do I need a driver's license to drive? Don't tread on me.
Oh, so here we're sitting in the border thing, like, oh, are we even gonna get there? Because Luke's like, I got a passport. I just didn't think I would need it. Oh.
You got a little taste of my poor wife's existence with me day in and day out.
See, and CW's the revelation of the backstage of Luke's, because Luke, 32 viewers, you're cutting into my numbers, Luke. By the rules of YouTube, I should squish you. That's the rules of YouTube.
Listen, but if your thing is like people should just do what they want, not because that's the thing. I don't care about scale. I don't care about anything. The way that I do my channel should have high participation because otherwise I would be failing. I would not be successful.
Well, you're being very successful. I couldn't be more happy.
Well, nice. You're not doing anything today, are you? You're not live streaming, are you?
I'm not live streaming because, again, I got to fly to Portland. And so I just had to, my hair was driving me crazy. So I just cut it all off. And I have my own, also when CW started talking tech, I have my own technical issues because the camera on one of my computers quit. And so I don't know, even though my everyone would laugh at me if you knew exactly how many computers I actually own. I don't currently have exactly the right computer for what I want to do right now. So,
oh man,
I know, and of course, my wife just shakes her head.
I suspect Paul has enough computers to open like a little mom and pop shop if he wanted to. There in Sacramento, and he'd have adequate inventory, for several months.
Well, what's great is that the boys come over and it's like, let's play Civilization together while the girls watch The Bachelor. And so I just hand out
that
PCs.
Sounds like a great family.
I would be watching The Bachelor.
We know.
There's
Luke, some people that say, you can't have a female brain and a male body. And I just say, Luke.
I'm not going to touch that one.
So, Luke, what do you think of John Vervaeke talking to Hermes?
See, you even squashed my viewing. I would be watching Sam's video right now if it weren't for
That's
you.
For the record, I said earlier, I have no idea which conversations will do well or not do well. It was my best conversation with Vervaeke ever, that from my perspective, which means it'll probably be my worst performing. But
I just started it.
I like actually enjoyed having the conversation and listening, which sometimes I feel nervous because it's like half a performance and half a conversation. But
so I just started it. I'm gonna go back and finish it. But it made me think of the clip from Tombstone where Doc Holliday, when he's like finding out he's dying of tuberculosis or whatever he has from smoking all the time, and his girlfriend comes in and she just like encourages him to keep smoking and rolling, and he's just like, you know, he says like, you're a good woman, but then again, you may be the Antichrist. that's what that Vervaeke AI thing, the first couple minutes, made me think of. Because it's basically, I wonder if Vervaeke's read That Hideous Strength, because to me that's what AI is like. And this is related to the Hermes, like whether or not you think you're calling down principalities or what you think you're doing. It's like I tell my son, human beings with all their good intentions are playing checkers and principalities are playing 8D chess. So it's technological babble is basically what I think it is. Him talking to Hermes is a little bit of a different thing. I don't really, I mean, I don't know what I think of it. I don't really have a problem with it. I think it's, I think we are in the age of Aquarius and the world is becoming re-spiritualized. And I think that kind of stuff is going to become increasingly common. And here's the thing, like we're always playing with magic all the time. Like that came up in the estuary meeting the other day. Like like Chad said this, what do people think talking is? Like, what do you think we're doing? Like, this is all magic. It's just familiar to us and common, so we don't think it's magical. Yes. Come on, Pete.
Pete.
Transfigured, man.
Transfigured.
What is it called? Navigating Patterns? Something?
Yeah, navigating
it's my channel's Navigating Patterns. Find me on Patreon.
So I don't. Yeah, I
need a suit for the Florida conference. Please donate. Find the GoFundMe.
Yes. Grimm's gonna pretty soon be driving a new caddy down there. That's what he's gonna be.
He's gonna be flying in his private jet.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to his Fringe encounter with Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Oh.
Be good.
Oh.
The thing is that Jordan would know exactly how to talk with Grimm.
Like,
oh yeah,
this is like Jordan's like, oh, you're like my Albertan, oil worker hillbilly friends,
Yeah.
Or something.
What's weirder,
like,
talking to Hermes or talking to Grim Grit?
That is a valid question. I don't know.
What about the relationship between Hermes and the Hermeticism? That is also. Did you get into that with him at all, Sam?
I didn't touch Hermes directly. I flirted around Hermes with other examples.
Flitted?
We flitted around. I didn't talk. Hermes did not come up directly, but we talked about AI's ability to channel demons and stuff like that.
Yeah, Nathan, that's a good point.
Yeah, no, I'm like Nathan. I'm actually really curious what Nathan thinks more about this Hermes business because
I think he doesn't like it.
I think, I would trust Nathan's thoughts based off of his life experience and stuff like that.
I don't think, I mean, this is what I would say, I guess, is like, it's nothing to be trifled with. I mean, I'm of two minds in that, like, the delusion of the moral therapeutic deism modernist mind is that we think all this stuff we're doing all the time isn't spiritual anyhow. And again, read Screwtape or something. Principalities are playing 8D chess. Like they're manipulating you even though you don't think you do. So when it's explicit and overt, is it scarier? I don't know. I mean, tread lightly, but it's not like, I don't think it's any scary. You're doing it all the time anyhow.
I think Luke, we've had this conversation before. Luke is so pro woo that he is less wary of dark woo. And like, this is a common headbutting thing that Dave W. and I have with Luke is like, beware the dark woo. And Luke's like, why? Woo, more woo, please. So
I'm just not afraid of chaos. Chaos is just unmapped order. That's all it is.
Yeah, but I'm not sure Hermes is chaos.
I don't know what it is. I'm agnostic.
But you're right, Paul, that it's very interesting that it's Hermes because that has a lot to do with Neoplatonic Hermeticism. Bye, Paul. Yeah, although
Jewish
it's interesting, Justin Martyr often compares Christ and Hermes as being sort of analogous. Not that Justin Martyr doesn't think Hermes is a demon, he does, but when he is trying to communicate Christian ideas to his pagan audience in his apologies, he likens Christ to basically the role of Hermes, because Hermes is the chief messenger of the gods or something. Fun fact.
I love the fact that I'm totally oblivious to what even this Hermes stuff is. I'll have to go look it up, figure out what's going on. Is there some guy named Hermes that's gonna have a conversation? I know there's the Hermes.
Yeah. Haven't you seen the Disney movie? Right, he flies around. He's got wings on his shoes. Yeah.
No, I know there's Hermes, but is there some guy who calls himself Hermes that's gonna have a conversation with BBK?
No. Vervaeke was doing some sort of spiritual practice and had a spiritual encounter with a
he's talking to Hermes now.
empty
Okay.
entity that identified himself as Hermes. And Jordan Peterson dragged that information out of Vervaeke when they were talking most recently. You can tell that
he told him. He just like
I think there was some reluctance. I think Vervaeke was a little bit like, okay, I'll go there. And Jordan is non-judge. Jordan's very pro-woo, so
it didn't seem to bother Jordan.
No.
I'm not getting enough work done, so I'm gonna go. But it was good to talk with you all.
See you,
Michael. Thanks for popping in. Bye. CW.
Okay, I've got to get into this. So where's my best video to watch this Hermes thing? Was it a conversation? It was a conversation between BBK and JBP.
No, between Vervaeke and Jordan Peterson. If you look on Jordan Peterson's own channel, maybe it was a few weeks ago, you'll find that video.
Well, they're recording those sessions, right? I mean, they should just release the tape of the Hermes encounter.
Vervaeke is, you think?
Christopher Mastropietro.
Is he?
I mean, how could you not? Right? I mean, just for your own edification.
I tell you what, if they captured Hermes manifesting as the Archangel Michael, if they caught that on video, T-Grog, you would have to believe.
CW, what do you think? What do you think about this whole Hermes thing? Did you see it? Did you see those clips or whatever?
What do I think about this whole Hermes thing? I find the reaction almost more interesting.
Yes.
Than the reported phenomenon. But yeah. I mean, I try not to be in the business of psychoanalyzing John Vervaeke, and although it was interesting to see.
Yes, you do. I'm sure that there is part of your brain that has already tried to psychoanalytically map out Vervaeke.
Well, he probably is. He's just not in the business of it.
It was interesting. See, it's hard to know what the dynamic between Peterson and Vervaeke is because they go so far back.
Yeah.
As colleagues, like if you ever seen the events that it's like the Buddhism Student Alliance or something that the University of Toronto would put on these events way back in the day, and they would have Peterson and Vervaeke there, and it's just really fascinating to see their dynamic evolve in this kind of almost like found footage now of everything lasts forever of the internet. So yeah, it's hard to know what their relationship even is, much less discern that in the on-camera chemistry that they have. But I sense there's more to that story than we're aware of. But
I imagine it as those scenes in like that Hideous Strength where the people are only allowed into the back room to, only the people who work at the top levels of the NICE are able to go back there and talk to Alec Hassan's floating head.
I'm just imagining them like tripping acid together in the faculty lounge at like the psychology department at the University of Toronto.
You're right.
Ron,
what do you think?
Come on, what you, yeah.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
I'm recovering from eye surgery. It went really well. So that's why I look like a Zen monk. So thanks for letting me dip in. All right, here's the deal. I'm Jewish, was Buddhist, was New Age. 23 years ago at a pop festival, a girl witnessed to me about Jesus. Reluctantly, I said yes to him. And then in the middle of a dirt field, he showed up, his spirit, and I got radically changed, Saul to Paul. So I've been around spirits and all that. And so I know this stuff is real. I know, my opinion is it means us no good. I mean, dude, it's out to smoke us. With that being said, I heard something Chad the alcoholic say. He goes, I would rather someone be New Age, having their crystals, and I talk with them than they be nothing. I do agree with him on that part. I was John Radecki, I guess. You know, it's just that I'm like, oh man, you're tangling with something that doesn't, you know, it's going to bite you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like one of the things that I like, John, all the criticisms that we're leveling, I can guarantee you, John's the type of person where he's just like, if he were to listen to all this, he'd be like, this to me is like the equivalent of someone proof texting Trinitarian verses to you, Sam, or something, where you're like, yeah, I'm aware. I get it. Like, I've thought about all your concerns. I think John's aware of all this, wouldn't you say?
No. My opinion, and I'll be real careful. Before you know Christ, you know as best you can. You know, I mean, but once you meet him, then you're like, oh, wow, I didn't have the real thing. But I'm also glad John's at least testing the waters, or at least, you know, he's out there trying. Jesus said, I'd rather you hot or cold, not lukewarm. So John he's dipping in waters. He's in the wrong neighborhood, in my opinion, but at least he's in a neighborhood, so that, let's say Hermes, and this is just what I see will probably happen. Eventually, Hermes will either lead him down a weird road or will turn on him if he goes towards Jesus. And my hope is that Hermes does turn on him, reveals himself, and John calls out to Jesus, and then Jesus shows up like thunder.
Wow, Graham. Seems mean.
In my conversation with Vervaeke, I did bring up there's an English philosopher named John Dee, who's like from the late 1500s, early 1600s. And there was a similar surge in interest in Neoplatonism and Hermeticism and witchcraft, occultism, and the like at that period of time, in sort of like that late Renaissance, early Enlightenment phase. And so this guy named John Dee, who, I didn't totally say this, but I said that he sort of reminds me of Vervaeke, got really into crystal ball gazing, like literal actual crystal ball gazing, as a way of channeling spirits and talking with angels and that sort of thing. And that these angels that he was talking with, like, led him deeper and deeper into various forms of sexual sin, really. And that it basically destroyed his life. And that, I don't know. I think there's a lot more danger than we tend to think.
I don't want to interrupt you guys.
No, go.
One thing, like, you guys, it's a joke, but it's the truth. If there's ever a zombie apocalypse, all you guys are in trouble because they're going to love your brains. Like, if I was a zombie like you guys, I'm going to eat your brain. But one thing I think, all right, I've seen prayer be incredibly effective. I think if you pray for John, that the eyes of his understanding be opened up to know the height, the depth, the breadth, and width of God's love, you can cover them. And I lost my train of thought. I just appreciate you guys letting me in talk, because I'm the guy who comes in not with much of an education, but an experience. And what I see is a guy who's got a great education. And to be honest, I like John. I think he's got a great heart. You know, you could see if he really knew the truth, he would be like, yeah, I want it. So talk him through it. Because I argued like a madman for months with my friend, because I am Jewish. I hated Jesus. But I liked my friend Jennifer, and it was relational. It was all for, oh my God, we'd be smoking weed together, and like she had her own issues at the time. She got better. She'd be like, yeah, you're going to hell. I'm like, what? Wait a minute. Aren't you as high as I am? And she's like, yeah, but I know I'm bad. So
it's an unempathetic thing to say on weed.
Huh?
I said that's a pretty unempathetic thing to say on weed. Tell someone they're going to hell. I think that's weed's main vibe.
Oh, I know. That's wasn't a friend to me, but I think you guys can talk him through it. I mean, God put you guys in his path, especially, not just especially, but Paul Vanderklay, all you guys, you have the ability to talk with him where he's at and to let him vent all his no's, you know, all his like, oh no, I don't agree with you. And I don't even like that. You're like, fine, here, let's have another toke and we'll go, you know, we'll circle around back. One thing for me being here, like I've seen I don't know if you guys call it the woo-woo, the cars moving and ghosts and all that. Seen miracles, signs and wonders. And at this point, don't care. If there's no love, I just don't want to be around you. Part of the reason I'm here is to get a new language and understanding of what's going on in my experience. Because, all right, I'll say it for the first time live, and this is good. A while ago, about 2.5 years ago, I was going through a dark time spiritually, and then this girl shows up in a dream. She's described as overlooked and infinitely capable. There's a beautiful encounter between me and her that's clean and pure. I wake up, all the oppression is gone, and the love of God is with me. And I'm like, who was that?
Was it Hermes?
And I'm like, I'm sorry. Yeah, right. Exactly. It was Hermes' sister. So honestly, I think, and I'm asking you guys, because this is actually my moment. I don't mean to hijack everything. I'm like, dudes, did I meet Mary? Because like, I'm Protestant and Jewish, and like I just got help I can't deny.
It might as well go all the way, right, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, dude, it happened.
Transformation.
I mean, I can't deny my experience, so I have to be merciful. Like, I like talking to you guys because you're giving me a perspective. Back in the day, if it would have been Hermes, I'd been like, oh, danger, cast it out, shut him down. Now it's more like, all right, where is he at? Who's this Hermes all about? Let's pray.
Well, I think so. reading Sam's face, I think Sam would have probably similar qualms about meeting Mary as he would Hermes, perhaps.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, like even with Rebecca, I mean, you can be bullshitted and self-deluded on any side. And so you taking off, Lance? All right. See you, brother.
And I mean, I would also say not everyone that you talk to in a dream is a spiritual entity. I'm
listening.
Yeah.
What are they?
I don't know. Figments of your own dream imagination.
Oh, I'm not a nominalist.
Well, but I'm not saying that it couldn't be more than that either. Sometimes I just don't think like, when I have a dream about like my ex-girlfriend from high school and like trying to resolve an argument with her that I never resolved, it's not like I think that her dream spirit or something is over in my dream. But that sort of miraculous kind of help that really turns you around. That's something more than that kind of dream.
If I may, I'm not saying it was Mary. I'm just saying somebody showed up. And
right.
And even to this day, years later, the encounter is still with me. And the thing is, it always leads me towards Christ, to do good. Like everything is better. So that's why I'm like, okay. But getting back to John Vervaeke, I go by what is it leading you towards? Is it, oh, and when he said he wanted to have, develop a demon that Socrates had, I'm like, that kind of concerned me because, you know, what good did that do Socrates in eternity? Any answers? You know, I'm not trying to be sarcastic and I don't want to slam him, but if it's lust of the flesh, lust of the eye, lust of the flesh, pride of life, not a good thing. If it's fruits of the spirit, cool. I also think God is incredibly merciful. So for John, I don't know, God might use this thing. And I'm listening to you guys and watching to see how you respond. And, you know, that's my opinion. What do you guys think?
I think it's a little bit like Britney Spears.
Maybe it was Britney Spears in the dream.
In the sense that people seem to have an almost bizarre vested interest in the fate of this person that they don't really know, but regard as significant due to their relative influence and notoriety. I think there's a similar perverse fixation on the fate, let's say, of somebody like John Vervaeke, and you can say that it's different because, oh, you know, he's a thought leader, or he's, you know, he's influencing people's ideas in a way that's more explicit or perhaps palatable to an intellectual than, say, the pop music of Britney Spears or something. But I think that the interest in his trajectory is just as pernicious and bewildering to myself anyway. It's like let's let Vervaeke be Vervaeke and stop presuming that somehow we know what's best for him in terms of his conscience.
We know what's best for you.
And his ultimate convictions. To me, when I look at Vervaeke, I'm more interested in understanding him on his own terms, which is fucking difficult.
Personalism.
It's difficult enough as it is without adding onto that the requirement that he somehow be moving towards me or something, what I would prefer. That's kind of.
By the way, CW is really good at this because, like, I think, was it the last time you were over here? He's only been over here a few times, but CW it's kind of like, Sam, you're great at this too, like being a Luke translator, because I say all my things in the only way I know how to say them because I'm me. And then CW can spit, like, I think the last time you were here, you basically spit back at me, like more of a academic textbook understanding of personalism. And I was like, yeah.
There's a type of person who, for the sake of their own sanity, has to render, you know, more these utterances that you make.
Yeah.
I feel like Sam is a bit like that.
Or my wife will listen to CW and she's like, yeah, he makes sense.
It's just because CW and I were both in the way practices interpretation of tongues on a weekly basis. And so we still have the gift of interpretation of tongues within us.
Well, technically that was the sins of the fathers. That was my parents who were in the way. I was never in the way.
All right. Well, it got in you somehow.
I never got to ride on Werewolf's plane, regrettably.
Who, Werewolf?
Victor Werewolf, yeah.
Werewolves?
Yeah. I'll hook you
So
up.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh,
go ahead, Ron.
So what do you think? I have a strong opinion about spirits. I judge them. Do they lead you towards Christ or away? I don't know if that's being too rigid.
Well, I think that's what we're supposed to do, right? I mean, test the spirits.
Right. And when I talk about John Rebecki, because I see myself as him, as far as like I was talking to spirits. But I was searching. I was like, oh my gosh, I got one. I finally found God. And I'm like, when I did meet God, I'm like, oh boy, I was wrong. All right, that wasn't, and then glad to be here. So I think that's where I'm coming from. Just to let you know, it's like, if anyone's like, I deal a lot with New Agers, and I mean, if I don't know you, I'm still going to pray for you because I've seen the outcome. I feel like Edmund in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Like I've seen the White Witch. I was Edmund for a while. And I just see the end of someone who goes down that trail. It doesn't pay off too well. So that's why I'm so adamant about talking. That's why I want to talk to you guys about. Just I'm like, pray for him too. Just pray a lot because that will do huge. It will do a lot of good for him. So, but I'm still interested to hear what you guys have to say about Hermes.
So a couple quick housekeeping things. Sorry, we were full screened to make CW feel less insane with my setup so that we could see people better. So I wasn't allowed. So I couldn't see Michael and Mark to get back in and Grim now. So I want all you guys to talk over. So just give me a private chat that will pop up if I need to, so I can see you if you want to get back in. Or somebody needs in. Okay.
Okay.
Well, hi, everybody.
First, but yeah.
Oh yeah, we definitely need savings throws for this shit.
No,
so
you're gonna have to go over to my stream that starts in 10 minutes if you want any savings.
Okay, well we'll probably shut down then by about 10.
Well,
Mark,
Grim,
hi, Mark.
I want to know what kind of suit. I want to know what kind of suit Grim Grizz is going to buy that can upstage Jordan Peterson's suit.
Ooh.
It's dependent on how much of the funding comes in. Right now, it's looking like either off the rack or a tux rental.
Peterson's not using that frog cap anymore. You should see if he could donate it to your cause. The frog hat, Peterson's frog hat.
Yes, I want a suit based off of it by a custom tailor.
He doesn't seem to be using it anymore. You should see if he can donate it to you.
Grim, just go to Goodwill or some high-end resale
thrift shopping does appear to be what the funding is indicating right now.
And get the goofiest, most outlandish suit that you can find, and I want to see it.
I have style, so I know what to find. I know what to find. But Saul Copperman over here, it's a pleasure to meet you. It's fascinating.
Me too.
That's the thing everybody's focusing on. Poor John. But what's important to me is now we have to talk woo. We can't be a limited hangout that like talks denominational warfare and Trinity arguments and stuff. This event where he goes on Peterson blows open the door to the fact that as human adults we have to talk about this woo stuff now, as if it's not something we've been ignoring the whole time, and that's exciting. It sounds like Saul's an expert. So
yeah, Mark, go ahead. Yes.
Just starting off, where are we weighing in as a group or as individuals? Is it a feature of just consciousness or a psychological phenomena? Or are we talking about something that you all feel is somehow third party or objective or somehow a level of reality that, whether it may be empirically accessible or not, that's okay. But where are we at on? Is there any consensus on what you all think the demonic is?
No, it's okay. There's like a wave. And there's a bunch of people floating in the water. And some people be up here, some people be down here, but we're all over in the wave together on what is what and this ephemeral, what life is. And so we're all over the place on it, Mark. Everywhere.
It seems like that would be determine what your reaction would be.
Yeah, if the question is there any consensus? I think the answer is no.
No,
the answer is no.
We are the processing thereof.
So no
the
consensus and no
disembodied
real
souls of the
ability.
Nephilim who were killed during the flood that came into human bodies when angels had sex rituals with humans in the antediluvian world, who are now trying to distract human beings from God and seek their own destruction so that humans don't ever get elevated above angels in the age to come. This isn't that complicated.
Biblical theology.
Okay.
Tell me where to
Is that
sign.
literal, but literal or figurative? Do you mean that literally or figuratively?
I don't know what those words mean anymore. I used to know what those words mean. Somehow those words have
Literal's a hell of a word.
Have melted in my vocabulary, and I they don't work the way they used to.
It's because you've been going to Fourth Pres for too long, Sam. They corrected you.
Oh man,
Michael, you wanted back in. What do you got to say?
Oh, well, yeah, Ron came in and shared his story, which was great. And, I had I have had some personal experiences with that stuff, limited sense. And some of it was, to me, there's interesting aspects of it where I would say, like, at least on my own, for my own level of curiosity, like, I would say there were some empirically verifiable aspects to it, which is kind of interesting. But to go back before the other thing, as far as like Vervaeke and his encounters with Hermes and stuff, like a part of my dad's testimony was that he watched The Exorcist and he realized that he was being like attacked by demons or whatever after he saw that movie. So, just all the way that like God can use all this wacky stuff. I think, like at a certain point, when I was much less aware of Christians outside my own tradition, I probably would have been, like you'll hear people that are pretty fundamentalist and say like, oh, anytime a vision of Mary happens, that's demons. That's like, because Mary's not able to hear your prayers or anything, blah, blah, blah. And like, but then, I think that God kind of is very gracious and condescending to our expectations in a lot of ways. And so, I think it's a mixed bag, like of Marian apparitions where some of them, it seems like, some of them seems like it resulted in people like putting a bunch of gold necklaces and rings on statues of Mary because something happened there. And it's like, that doesn't seem like a very Christ-like thing. But then other miracles do result in very Christ-like fruit, I guess you could say. So, it's just, so in that sense, it's like if John Vervaeke is somebody who, because he's had so many experiences with like psychedelics and these meditative practices and stuff that he's inoculated himself to a lot of woo-woo stuff. So if this is something that he's, actually like taking this event seriously, or if God is going to speak to him, it may be that he would speak to him in a way that John Vervaeke would be more opening to listen. So, which may be through Hermes, or so it's like, is God telling an angel, go pretend you're Hermes or whatever and talk to John Vervaeke and say this or whatever, or is there an actual being named Hermes? It's kind of, because spirits can lie, because the other one, I put a little clip on my channel from that book that Paul talked about, Don't Sleep, There Are Snakes, about that missionary spirits on the beach. Well, like at some point toward the end of the book, he starts translating the gospel into their language and stuff, and he like shows them a slideshow with like depictions of New Testament stories, and then the women, somebody comes up and says, the women are afraid of Jesus. And he says, why? He said, oh, Jesus tried to have sex with them last night. And they said that Jesus was running around the village and he had a 3-foot-long penis and he was trying to have sex with all the women. So I'm like, well, I believe the Bible, so that tells me that's not Jesus. But, according to their like worldview of just believing in spirits and stuff, that was a pretty smart deception. So, you know, which that's why I say, like, go to being a Protestant. Even the Orthodox and the Catholics will have to use the Bible as their like way to discern what's going on with these spiritual things. So
the old Christian, like if you read the church fathers, and yes, the book of Enoch and Anselm and all of your favorite church fathers will in the early period will have said this too, is that the demons, which are, like I said, the disembodied souls of angel human hybrids killed by the flood, their soul, these spirits like attaching themselves to altars to the pagan gods and tricking the people who worship the pagan gods and take on the names of the pagan gods so that they can elevate and magnify their own power and deceive people away from the truth. And so, like, when Paul says in 1 Corinthians, you know, that which the pagans offer to gods, they actually offer to demons. That's that idea that the pagan gods are actually there. It's not that they don't exist. That's not, I mean, Paul it's like Paul doesn't think Zeus exists. Sorry, Jonathan Peugeot. But he does think that there is a demon that is imitating Zeus and taking on the name of Zeus, that is absorbing the worship of Zeus and magnifying his power through that to keep people from the truth and to get them to do sinful and evil things in Zeus's name. That is that like in the first couple centuries of Christianity, like that view slips away, but also slips away because paganism disappears. But when Christianity was in constant conflict with paganism and in a predominantly pagan environment, that was their answer to why paganism. It's not that paganism doesn't have any power to it, or that they couldn't tell the future or perform miracles or even get some amount of divine favor through their sacrifices. That wasn't the Christian position. It was just that it was demons doing this to distract you from the truth, and that Jesus has been elevated above the power of all the demons.
All right, folks. Mark, say something, and then I'm probably going to shut this down so people can go to Grim.
So I wanted to ask Sam quick. Sam, you've been doing a lot of reading in the patristics. Have you got to the Cappadocians yet?
Like Hank and I are doing Basil the Great next. And so we're going to do Basil the Great's on the Holy Spirit. I have opened the document before, but I have not yet gone very far. So the Cappadocians are next on the menu. I wish I were more excited about it than I am, but maybe once I start reading them, they'll pull me in. But right now I'm a little bit, it feels more like homework than like excited reading at this point.
They're the greats. They're the three greats.
Says who?
Or don't forget the sister.
Yeah, four. Sorry, as everyone knows from my last live stream, I'm a misogynist. Okay, Mark.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. Just you may not have time to answer, but just two thoughts. One, why are the church fathers a more reliable source for interpretation than anything else? And two, by what mechanism does someone's activity in our physical, wherever realm, the human realm, feed a so-called demon? I don't, you say worship, okay, whatever that is, will somehow fuel a demon who identifies as Zeus, will then empower that demon to do more malicious things in our realm. And it just seems to me like it's just a kind of slippery slope of potentially muddled thinking. And I say that with respect to you, Sam, as probably an intellect vastly greater than myself. So I'm criticizing someone I'm not really qualified to criticize, but I'm just throwing that out there. For me, if I follow your train of thought, it just seems to me as just a quagmire that I could not work myself out of.
Sure. Well, let's imagine that John Vervaeke goes full on fake guru And I'm not saying he's going to do this. I really don't think he was going to do
right
this.
to reply. He could go on decoding
but
the gurus.
Let's imagine like John Vervaeke breaks bad, and he starts getting a lot of his students and YouTube audience and whoever else that might be attracted to follow him to start doing various things that also engage with and contact Hermes. And that more and more of his students start having these interactions with Hermes, and that they start offering sacrifices, engaging in hooded rituals in the woods, or whatever other sorts of weird things that we would imagine would be involved in, and taking psychedelics. And then, Hermes starts instructing them in the various sexual practices that are outside the norm that they should engage in to better, consult Hermes. And more people are attracted to this, and more people are doing this. Like, I think even a materialist could understand, even if they think that Hermes is a metaphor, whatever, or figurative, whatever exactly that might mean, that there is this growing power around John Vervaeke and his connection to Hermes, where John Vervaeke is basically the prophet or something like that of the cult of Hermes, and that it's having greater influence on people's lives. Maybe they're giving money to the Vervaeke Hermes Foundation, and then that money is being spent to grow the cult and that sort of thing. That even a strict materialist could understand that as something is getting more and more powerful. And so when the church fathers are saying that these demons benefit from the worship that's given to them, I think that's, it's not hard to understand that. They mean it in like a spiritual sense, but the spirit world and the material world are very interpermeable in their minds. And so you can understand, I don't feel like it's that hard to understand what exactly they're saying and meaning by that. And so when you have emperors and armies and stuff worshiping Zeus or Apollo or whoever in the ancient world, and engaging in financial and sacrificial activities and taking instruction and influence from that, that's having a very dramatic effect in the world. And so whatever this Apollo character is, the behavior and change in the physical world is noticeable and real. And exactly how that works is, I feel like, the question. But I don't think there's any argument that it's a powerful thing at that point.
Nice. All right. Well said, Sam. We're gonna just close her down. CW, thanks for joining me. This is the gift that I've been gifted by CW because
it'd bring you good fortune. It's the year of the dragon.
So there we go. I'm going to set up a little altar to this.
Good.
Start praying to it.
Do acid before you do it, though.
JK.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Let me join in.
Guys, for coming. Until
don't
next
take
time.
any sexual advice from the dragon.
Luke.
I'm out of here.
All right.
At least wait till I leave.
All right. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Oh, I got to shut down the stream. Okay.
All right. We're out of
Peace
here.
to all. Goodwill to men.
Bye-bye.